Good morning. Today is Tuesday, November 12th. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners. In terms of item number one, our adjustments to the agenda, we do have a 10 a.m. time certain in approximately 60 minutes. So wherever we are at that time, we'll try to hit the mark and have our folks come in on the economic development issue. And secondly, we have a 1:30 time certain for our afternoon session for our public works items. We have also a 3:30 time certain on back with a discussion of our coordinated facility planning and an executive session at some point in the afternoon. I believe that's when we will have that. And tomorrow we will have an we have a regular session, a board meeting, a work session, work session at 9 a.m. That should go until before noon, probably a little ahead of noon. And then at 1:30, the Board of Commissioners will not be meeting, but the 5 commissioners and 2 resident commissioners of the Homes for Good Board of Directors, Board of Commissioners meeting will be at 1:30 in the Commissioners Conference Room. So 2 very full days of meetings, followed by lots of other things on Thursday, including the opening of our Housing First facility at MLK Commons, right off of MLK, and that'll be at 10:30 on Thursday morning. A number of us will be there for that. So, are there any other adjustments to the agenda that commissioners would like to bring to my attention at this time? Seeing none, I'll ask Mr. Mokryski, are there any other adjustments to the agenda?
No.
Okay. We'll roll into item number 2, emergency business. Is there any emergency business?
No.
We'll roll into item number 3, our public comments. And I'd like to ask people to come up in the order in which they have signed up. And would you mind bringing up the sign-up sheet? That'd be great. Thanks so much. And who's first on the sign-up sheet? Mr. Dickinson. Okay, so I'm going to read the names of the people. Thanks so much. I'm going to read your name, and when I do read your name, get ready to come up. So it'll be Mr. Dickinson first, Mr. Piccioni second, Nathan Marple third, Heather fourth, Bill Spencer, and Jim Wittenberg. So we'll just take people in that order. So, and I'll ask you to come up as Mr. Dickinson has done, give your name, tell us where you live. Our vice chair will start the timer for 3 minutes. That'll be the green light. When you have 30 seconds left, the yellow light will come on. At the end of 3 months, the red light comes on.
3 months?
3 months? 3 minutes. Sorry, today is there's no sale today.
I don't have that kind of time.
Yeah, no, we don't have that kind of time. Not even a commissioner could talk that long. And so then at the conclusion, the red light will come on, and I believe we now have a buzzer. Is that correct?
It just beeps.
It just beeps. So, all right. So without further ado, Mr. Dickinson, just give us your name and tell us where you live, and our timer will start.
Thank you, Chair Sorensen and Commissioners. Good morning. I'm Rob Dickinson. I live in unincorporated Cottage Grove. I'm here today to request that the Board of Commissioners agenda team place an item on the agenda for the December 3rd or December 4th Board of Commissioners meeting to decide if you will refer the community rights initiatives. All of the information that you need to make that decision is available now, and what's left is for you to decide. At the joint work session on October 16th, you heard clear and convincing testimony showing that commissioners cannot be held liable for referring a ballot measure, even if that measure is later determined to be preempted or otherwise unconstitutional. The County Council's assertion that commissioners could be liable is unprecedented. Unprecedented in that he has not been able to show any examples anywhere, anytime, where a commissioner has been shown liable for referring any ballot measure. Despite that, on October 29th, we came back here to the Board of Commissioners, provided a new version of the ballot measure of the aerial spray initiative that eliminated any concern about preemption. In the style of Measure 47, it allows any preempted provisions to lie dormant until that preemption is later lifted. So we have 3 key points. First, public officials are fully immune from liability for legislative acts. That is the Bogan versus Scott Harris Supreme Court case and all the derivatives. There is a lack of any case history demonstrating liability for referring any preempted or unconstitutional ballot measures. We still have not heard anything of that nature. And finally, the new version that we have provided to you that allows there to be preempted provisions in there and for them to be codified but held dormant without causing the measure itself to be preempted or invalid. So all of the key items that you would need in order to refer the ballot measure have been addressed. So all that's left is for you to decide. What you decide is up to you, but we would just ask for you to decide, to put it on the agenda and make a decision and vote. And that's what you're here to do, is to decide. So we would request that during today's agenda team portion of the agenda, item 13B, that the commissioners add to the December 3rd or December 4th agenda an item for you to consider the referral and to make a vote and to decide. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair,
Yes.
real quick, I think you said the warning light comes on at 30 seconds. It was changed to 1 minute
Oh,
per the equity recommendations last week.
oh, okay.
I just want to, just so folks know, the yellow light comes on 60 seconds before your
Yeah.
time is up.
Thanks for pointing that out. I did not know that. I knew they had recommended it, but I didn't know that it had been implemented already. So welcome, Mr. Piccioni.
Hi, Dave Piccioni, live in Eugene. I want to just comment on economic growth, and as an indicator of a country's or a state's well-being. Even though I think that being financially stable is extremely important to not kind of go crazy, but in general, I wouldn't say that economic development is a wonderful thing. Wars, pollution, planned obsolescence. If you wanna make money and you make TVs or something, just don't make them as well as you could, because that way they last 3-4 years and then you have to buy another one, and that's good for the economic indicator of a country's well-being. I think that RAIN program sounds pretty good. I would just like to know who's heading it and who's on the board and all that. But it sounds like a good thing. I wrote my notes even though I don't have my glasses. So yeah, some people suggested that the indicator of a country's well-being is not the economic growth, because growth is how the planet can't grow indefinitely or forever, because there's only a certain amount of resources that we can mine, trees that we can use, water that we can drink. So with a lot of these businesses that encourage people to start new businesses aren't always good. That's pretty much my basic opinion, even though I didn't lay it out very perfectly. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you coming in. Okay, next up, Nathan Marple, and sure.
The line confused us out there, and we really wanted Bill to go first.
Okay, we can have Bill go first. Bill Spencer go first, and then you want to go Nathan, or do you want to go Heather next?
Oh, I'll go next.
Okay, So we'll have Bill Spencer, then we'll have Nathan Marple, and then we'll have Heather. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Commissioners. William Spencer, Cresswell, talking to you about a discussion item you've got this afternoon, 82855 Butte Road. I'm a businessman in Cresswell who's been there for 40 years in that business. Have hired, yesterday I looked, we've hired 600 young people since 2000. I know the town, and the town knows me, and I have strong ownership feelings about how our town does. And it wasn't too long ago, it was in 2015 that I started to hear stories about a house on Butte Road and some problems. I heard about a lady who had her boots stolen off her front porch in daylight, her cowgirl boots. And the guy comes up with a hood, walks to a porch and walks away with it. She had a camera, a doorbell camera, saw what the vehicle looked like, couldn't see the license number, he had a hood on. She found the vehicle at his house. That's the first of many stories I heard. I heard about a drug overdose and a lady dying there, but the neighbors have been there for 40 years. The guy is almost blind. He was feeling like he couldn't walk out to his mailbox, which is a difficult thing for him to do because of the safety. So I was aware of that, and then somebody brought it to my attention that this house was in a foreclosure. And I thought, you know what? I know that the deputies have been there a lot. They can't seem to stop it because they can't identify which person that's crashing there is doing the crimes. So I talked to a deputy and wanted to get their opinion, and then I heard that it was a halfway house. And he was kind of laughing when he said that. And I said, what? He said, it's halfway between Portland and Grants Pass. And the people in Portland that steal the stuff bring it to this house, and the people from Medford come up and get it and sell it down there. And I'm going, this is the last straw. When people in Portland and Medford know about Cresswell for that, that really bothered me. So I thought about it overnight and decided I had a plan that I might be able to make a difference. I can tell you that you can get to the bank in Cresswell at 9 o'clock when it opens. You can buy a cashier's check, and you can be in the deputy's office to have your funds examined by 10 till 10, because that's what I did the next day. It was kind of an impulse thing. Anyway, I ended up with it. I knew nothing about a lien. That's my responsibility, but I didn't know anything about it. I bought that house so I could make a difference. It's the 5th house I've done in the last 5 years to make a difference. The others worked out well. This one here was doing fine until I found out there was a lien on it. The fact is, I give the county credit for going in there and trying to resolve an issue, which was a sewage issue. But they didn't abate anything. What they did was they used the club of fines to try to get the landowner to do that. That doesn't work very well if they don't care and they're druggies. And so they ignored it, and there we go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so next would be Mr. Marple, welcome, and followed by Heather, followed by Jim Wittenberg.
Nathan Marple, Cresswell. I'm also speaking to the Butte Road House. I also have had a bad history with this house. About $20,000 of stuff was stolen from my house in the middle of the night. I actually found the pickup there at the house, called the police. So it's just kind of a scourge of the neighborhood, and it's been that way for a long time. And we were really happy when Bill was able to purchase the house, and he was able to nicely remove the people without even involving county or any of those resources. And we approached Bill because occasionally I fix a house up. We approached him to buy the house for about $105,000, and we've looked at the county's estimate, and it just seems way, way off. It's basically a crack house, and the only way we're even able to not burn the place down is because we're going to do almost all the work ourselves. And Heather's going to speak to that, and she brought some pictures. So I just don't know if we can make the purchase and support that lien. That's our problem. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, Heather, and then Jim Wittenberg.
Hi, my name is Heather. I'm from Cottage Grove. And like Nathan was saying and Bill, I'm more interested in just fixing the house up. And there's the lien on it from the county, which I understand. That makes sense. But the amount of the lien is more than we would be able to use if we have to pay that as well as try to fix this house up. And I do have some pictures, if you'd like to see them, of the condition of the house. The investment purpose for us is just not feasible. I just want to get in there and fix it up and make it a nice house so that we can turn around and sell it. And with the amount of the lien being there, it's just, and it seems to just continue to increase and get higher and higher. So that's mostly what I'm looking for, is a decision on the lien. Thank you.
Probably leave the pictures right here,
Yeah,
Yes, John?
we'd like to see the pictures.
and we'll get them back to you. Thank you.
Well, okay, so Mr. Wittenberg, or Dr. Wittenberg, I should say, isn't that correct? If I remember that right?
Call me doctor.
Why don't you sit up there at the, one of those microphones there?
Back east, I'm called doctor. Out here, I'm called pharmacist, so I don't.
So you're a doctor of pharmacy, so you get doctor, I think.
Okay.
You can tell us, Dr. Wittenberg, where you live, well, your name and where you live, and then take 3 minutes.
I've just moved down here from Portland. I read, I saw on TV this morning, they had 5 shootings there last night. When I was a kid, if we had.
We got to
one-
stop you
if
and
we had
just
one-
ask you your
Oh,
name and
that-
where you live,
oh,
and
Jim
then our vice chair will start the timer.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm Jim Wittenberg. I'm currently using the First Christian Church. As a matter of fact, I'm looking for a home here.
In Eugene?
Yeah, I moved my adult and family services file down here and my.
Okay,
my
very
SNAP
good.
card, so I'm
Welcome.
officially registered down here, I guess. Yeah, I was thinking about how safe it used to be here in Eugene when I lived here 40 years ago. And it was a nice little town, and there was no West Eugene and no North Eugene. And Springfield was a little bitty town, about 50 or 60 buildings in it. And that's all happened in the last 40 years. But it's gotten increasingly dangerous here. I'm afraid to go down the sidewalks because I'm almost out in the traffic in West Eugene. And I don't go out at night anymore because I'm afraid to go out with all the people, both the people that are homeless, so to speak, and people who aren't homeless, who steal just as much as the homeless people do. I've come to a point of proposing that maybe shooting is probably too extreme, but maybe we could just cut off a hand of the thieves to go in here, and if you get both hands off, you can't steal much of anything. They've stole 3 cell phones I've had this year so far. And I think it's expensive. You know, I don't want to support Bill Gates and this guy at Apple. It doesn't make much sense to me. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I gave up on both those parties years ago. And I vote for whoever I want to. The last election, I voted for 2 Republicans for governor and secretary of state. The term before that, I voted for Democrats in the office because I felt they were the better candidates. So it doesn't matter to me what label you put on yourself. It's kind of like the federal politics now, which I spent 5 years back there in Washington and decided that they're all, let's see, what I say, just they're not the nicest people in the world. I wouldn't want to sell my used car to them because they would use a lobbyist to decide what to do with it and whether to pay me or not. Secondly, I have an initiative here which I've carried for off and on for 40 years. This is on property taxes. As you remember, there was a young guy that brought up a initiative from California called Proposition 13. Made a lot of interest up here. We got it on the ballot in '78. It was the same exact version again in 1990 when it passed. So that's our property tax law in Oregon. The one thing I didn't think about was that older people, when they retire, don't have an income to speak of. I get $1,000, a little over $1,000, $28 a month. You can't pay property taxes on that. You can't do it.
Thanks so much for your public comment.
Okay, I've got some copies of this I made for you guys. So that you-
Okay, well, we'll hand that to our county administrator, and he'll
okay.
make sure it's up on our
You can blame
website.
Tom Hartung for this. He got me into politics.
All right, very good. Tom and I were in the Senate together.
I know, I remember that.
Okay, so thanks for everybody that's come for public comment. Is there anybody out there in the audience who wants to give public comment who is not signed up? All right, well, thank you very much for your public comment today. We do have time on our agenda before our 10 a.m. time certain to have commissioner responses to public comment. Item number 4 on our agenda. So do any commissioners want to be recognized to make some responses to public comment? Okay, Commissioner Farr, then Commissioner Buck.
This is a response and/or other issues and remonstrances. Dr. Wittenberg, I moved to Eugene in the early 70s. In about 42 years ago, I started working at Jerry's out on Highway 99, and there was a lot of green space between Jerry's and Eugene at the time. There isn't so much these days. Mr. Spencer, we will be discussing your item later on this afternoon, so I'll not make any comments at this point in time. Thank you for your presentation together. But the thing that I wanted to mention is this morning was an opportunity for me to go to the Looking Glass breakfast and just the other items, Mr. Chair. Wanted to talk ever so slightly about youth services in Lane County. Looking Glass has been around for a long, long time. My first involvement was in 1996 when the city of Eugene sold an old fire station to Looking Glass for $1. It became Station 7, which was one of the first runaway youth. It was called Runaway Youth at the time, but this housed youth living spaces. It's grown quite a bit since then. Looking Glass has a lot of bricks and mortar, a lot of buildings, schools, teachers to support and to pay. So I'm a strong supporter of Looking Glass. Looking Glass is working closely with youth. Ms. Mokraski, back in 1997, a former Lane County employee, Pearl Wolf, retired from Lane County not so long ago, was a Looking Glass staff who staffed the Council Committee on Homelessness and Youth, which wrote the Eugene Camping Ordinance. Looking Glass has been integral in Lane County for a long, long time. And today, they're working, I hope, ever more closely with another agency, 15th Night, which doesn't have bricks and mortar, but 15th Night and Looking Glass have similar missions. My hope, my expectation, and my wish is that there'll be a very close amalgamation of missions so that they coordinate their efforts together for going into the future. Looking Glass has been around a long time. They have bricks and mortar, and I really am proud to support Looking Glass. Thank you.
I wanted to thank Heather for the pictures. I haven't seen those before, so thank you for that. And as Commissioner Farr said, we'll be talking more about that this afternoon. I just wanted to also acknowledge Veterans Day yesterday. And I had a chance to go down on Friday to Cottage Grove High School, where the students put together a little luncheon for the veterans in their community, which was really sweet. And I have not experienced that at different high schools, but that one seemed extra special. So I just want to thank those students for doing so. And I know it was your job, but I appreciate all the veterans' sacrifices that they've made for us in our country.
Okay. Commissioner Bozevich.
Thank you. And I will say to Bill, Nathan, and Heather, we will be talking this afternoon. And I appreciate what you guys have done for the Cresswell community. I also want to thank our veterans. I had a note here to do so, and specifically thank Commissioner Farr for his service to our nation as the veteran on the commission. We can't thank our veterans enough.
My service was easy during peacetime. Others had it not so easy.
Yeah. And I just, on a little bit of a lighter note, today is the 49th anniversary of the exploding whale.
Thank you, Jay.
So it is Exploding Whale Day in Oregon, so
And pieces are still coming down.
yeah. So just, yeah, thought I'd put a smile on everybody's face after some more serious conversation.
Let's keep in mind, that, you know, before you make remarks, let's keep in mind today is Exploding Whale Day. Okay.
You can keep that in mind, Mr. Chair.
And the unintended consequences of government actions.
Yeah. Unlike the other commissioners, I'd like to thank you for sharing. Those pictures look like it was just a jewel of an investment opportunity. And we will be discussing that later. I would also just like to state that I'd like to publicly acknowledge my oldest son, who is my stepson, who is 42 and who is a veteran and had 2 tours of duty, one in the Middle East in Afghanistan and one in South Korea. And what motivated him to join was when he and my youngest son and I watched the towers go down on September 11th. So I, too, would like to acknowledge that it's Veterans Day and that our family is deeply involved. And that would have been one of my great joys, was to have joined the service. But I, of course, was labeled 4F with diabetes, and that just was not an option. That's all I really have to say. I appreciate the remarks, and I look forward to the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And I just want to thank everybody for their public comment, and especially Mr. Wittenberg for your public comment about the ballot measure you're pursuing. Thanks for keeping us up to date on that. And then for our friends from Cresswell, you know, sometimes they say a photo is worth 1,000 words. And I think that was understated by about 1,000% in the case of those photos. So thanks for giving some life and meaning to item 12A. That really helped. And as you undoubtedly know, we're going to have a public session at, I would say, somewhere in the range of either before 3:30 or right after 3:30. So we have that time certain in there for 30 minutes at 3:30. So can't quite tell yet, but I'll try to keep people up to date as we plow through the meeting. Just looking at the afternoon session, we have at 1:30, we have 2 items that are estimated to be about an hour. So we could take that item up, because if we go from 1:30 to 2:30, we'd have a half an hour. And that's what the agenda team planned, to perhaps shoehorn in that discussion ahead of the 3:30. But we put it at behind because we often are behind. So anyway, so thanks so much for bringing in the pictures, and it really helps us out. I think we are all going to want to know, you know, more detail on the amount of the lien and what would be forgiven and all that. So, and then I think at this point we'll move on to item number. Well, let me just say something about Veterans Day. I think we all have, as Americans, recognize that people, either through the draft or through volunteering, join the military. And I just take a brief exception to Commissioner Farr saying, well, he was in peacetime. But the point is, yeah, the point is that that you don't know that when you sign up. You sign up to be in the military and beyond the federal military, into beyond the Department of Defense, into the Coast Guard, into the various states' National Guards. You don't know. And so it is a profound opportunity for us to thank veterans. And I'd probably extend that to their families that really give a lot. And as Commissioner Burney mentioned, back in the 70s, when the draft was still on, all of the men over 18 had to go through a process of having their draft status determined. And so I also got the 4F draft deferment, and that meant that I was eligible to go into the military after all the other men and after all the other women. So that meant that for practical purposes, I was barred from military service. But I do know from my own family the kind of sacrifices that are made. I had a cousin that was in the Air Force, and he was both in wartime and peacetime transferred all over the world. He was in the Middle East, he was in Nebraska with the Strategic Air Command, he was in Washington, D.C., dealing with the Air Force budget. My own father in World War II in a tent for 8 months in the jungles of the Philippines, and all kinds of horrific battle scenes and death and just really hard things. And then other relatives of mine in the Korean conflict. And so people that are in that role, they don't know what's going to be happening to them. They often have some control, but they have ultimately no control of whether we're going to have a war or not. And so it is an opportunity for us. And we do that on the 11th day of the 11th hour of the 11th month because of World War I. And my own grandfather was in World War I in the trenches of France, and that was another horrific part of American history. And to have the U.S. Be one of the main protectors of democracy in Europe. So we've had a lot of people from our families and people in our community that have drafted or volunteered into the service and have given of themselves, and their families gave a lot. And sometimes these Veterans Day observances are pretty moving for the people and that are involved. And I just want to thank everyone who serves their country.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so we're on to item 5, and before I call for a motion on item 5, I'll just mention that on item 5C2, we're going to be, at least on the consent calendar, we're going to be approving the sale of county-owned real property. And you'll notice that Jeff Turk's name is listed as a contact for that. He's our property management officer. And Jeff and the people that work in property management have a really hard job. They often have to go to places that are difficult to sell, and they often have to encounter people that aren't really nice to them. And I just want to give a shout out to Jeff Turk and all the good work he's done for Lane County over the years, and have him to some degree recognized for doing a good job in trying to protect the public interest. Are there any items that any commissioner wants to take off the consent calendar? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Burney to approve the consent calendar and all of the orders therein. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And the motion carries 5-0, and all orders are approved by unanimous vote of the Board of Commissioners. All commissioners present and voting aye. So thanks so much for that. I think at this point, I'd like to maybe call on our county administrator. Let's see, we have Mr. Kyler or Mr. Kincaid, they may be able to come down here. But in the meantime, why don't we have item 7E and have our county administration announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first thing, as Mr. Kyler and Mr. Kincaid are making their ways down here on those items, first thing is the board had asked that we report back, that we do some research on efforts that have been taken by other jurisdictions regarding kindness initiatives, and to report back to the board under county administrator announcements on that. So I have a brief update for you. Mr. Kincaid has done some research and determined the following, that the Eugene School District, 4J School District approved a board letter of support for making Eugene and Springfield cities of kindness. This is within the 4J district boundaries. The city of Eugene took no formal action. Mayor Vinnis did support a kindness discussion event on November 4th. City of Springfield also took no formal action. They promoted the November 3rd Choose Kindness event, and Mayor Lundberg is scheduled to read a proclamation for Cities of Kindness Day on November 18th. A few cities, mostly in California, have taken efforts to become cities of kindness. We did reach out to our comparable counties throughout the state of Oregon and have not had any responses regarding any formal kindness initiatives that they have taken on. So I have a number of other items that I could go through to talk about areas in which Lane County is taking formal steps to implement pieces of what would be, I think, considered kindness efforts, but I'll pause with that because I think your primary request was just whether or not other jurisdictions have taken on these efforts.
Okay.
Any questions?
Yes, there are questions. Commissioner Farr.
Actually, just a comment, Ms. Mokrasky. The November 4th event was very well attended, about half a block from here, and a number of Lane County employees and staff members were there. I was in the audience. It was a very well handled, and if there are some videos of it, I'd encourage people to take a look at the speeches that were made. Thank you.
Okay. Would you like to make more announcements, or would you like to suspend and have Mr. Kincaid come up for his 20-minute item?
I'm happy to suspend my time. I've got one or two more items to discuss, but I can be flexible about when.
All right. Why don't we call up Mr. Kincaid at this time, because he's here and he has a 20-minute item that we can perhaps do between now and our time certain at 10 o'clock. And so why don't we call up Jeff? So Mr. Kincaid and others are at the table. So we'll go to item 7B, order 19-11-12-6 in the matter of authorizing purchase of real property for $3,150,000 and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute documents necessary to complete the purchase. The board has had extensive briefings in executive session on this topic and has had an opportunity to ask a lot of questions and make comments, but no decisions are made in executive session. So we're here today. Mr. Kincaid, a Lane County Management Analyst, is here. If you could introduce the people at the table, that would be great.
Chair Sorensen, Commissioners, Greg Rickoff, Director of Operations, and I'm going to go ahead and do the honors as the individual tasked with overseeing parole and probation. We are grateful to be with you here on Exploding Whale Day. Thank you for taking the time and helping us make great governmental decisions. With me is Jeff Kincaid, and we have Christine Moody as well, our budget manager. Just very quickly, the board is being asked to approve the purchase of real property consisting of 5 contiguous tax lots that total 4 acres located on the northeast corner of Roosevelt Boulevard and Highway 99 North. We're asking for your approval for the purchase today. The reason behind this decision is our need to secure a main building for the use of the home of Parole and Probation. This would house the 59 full-time employees and provide for the business function needs for the program with improved safety and access. It would allow us to consolidate office spaces so that outstations would exist solely based on business need and not simply because we have no other place to put individuals. It'll also allow us to get out from under certain contracts to provide training, physical training, defensive tactics, and other items, which, as well as full meeting space for parole and probation, all of which right now we are dependent on the kindness of either other departments or other agencies in the county to manage those services. With that, I'll turn it over to Jeff Kincaid.
Good morning, Chair Sorensen, Commissioners. So this item before you is, I'll just do a very high-level overview. We've talked about it a lot. The purchase is for $3,150,000. That's the total price. It's a $350,000 down payment with 5% interest over 20 years. There's a buyout with penalty option after 5 years. The main reason for these kind of terms is the property was really only open for lease until we talked to the owner and they were willing to sell to an agency such as ourselves who's really stable. They were looking for long-term fixed income to care for their children. So it kind of worked out really nicely. We didn't have to have a huge capital expenditure all up front, and they could meet their financial needs as well. So if the board approves this item today, this is to delegate authority to the county administrator to complete negotiations and execute documents to purchase the property. The only negotiation points left to work out are the results of the environmental, so remedying those environmental issues. We should be seeing the final phase 2 report today, but the board has already been briefed on the high level of the environmental issues in executive session because they're part of the real property transaction. So you last heard an update, Greg kind of spoke to it on October 15th regarding our efforts to complete our strategic plan goal of pursuing a new location for adult parole and probation. This also has a side note of returning the community correction center space to use by the sheriff's office, which is actually a huge positive. The space really never met the needs since 2012 of parole and probation, and the sheriff's office could put it to good use providing service to the community. The property itself will be purchased by a county general fund and then leased back to the occupants of the buildings. This is really similar to how we manage all of our other properties. In addition, general fund will be used to bring the property up to a plain vanilla shell. So this is something that's really common on the commercial realtor side. So they'll do the main systems and the main electrical panels, all that kind of stuff, but they won't service like all the individual outlets, all the airflow stuff. That will all be done by the tenant, which in this case would be parole and probation. To that end, parole and probation currently has $2.2 million in reserves set aside specifically for relocation. A portion of that was allocated by the PSCC for that specific purpose. The current due diligence period runs through this Friday, November 15th. We can extend that if the owner is amenable to that. We are expecting that, again, that environmental report today, so there's going to be some back and forth on how we're going to remedy the issues. But you'll note in the packet there that it is a not to exceed $3.15 million for the purchase. Once negotiations around environmental issues have been completed, we'll take steps toward closing on the property. In the offer, which is like 30-something pages long, you can see that it's a 45-day closing period. So around the end of the year is when we're anticipating, maybe into January. After closing, we're anticipating an 18 to 30-month lead time until we can move parole and probation in. The reason for the big gap is we know things can happen. We could say, you know, we're going to move them in 24 months, and then we run into some issues, and then we end up doing 30. So we're trying to be realistic until more design work has been done. The board will be brought additional items for approval after design and budgeting work has been completed in more detail, and we will work with the county administrator to provide updates to the board on the progress made on this project. And that is actually all I have on the presentation, and I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, very good. Do commissioners want to be recognized to discuss this before we move to a motion? Commissioner Farr, go ahead and make a motion if you'd like to.
I will, after a brief preamble. I won't talk to the details of the real estate agreement, and I will not talk to the needs of parole and probation. Those are all quite evident. Other commissioners may wish to. What I'd like to talk to ever so briefly is the location. The location is in Bethel. It's at Four Corners. I've lived in Bethel, as I mentioned earlier, for about 42 years now, so I've seen a lot of changes in our area. And the location has adjacencies. There are some residential adjacencies. There are some mainly business adjacencies. So without asking you questions at this point in time, I will mention that I have spoken with the city councilors whose wards abut or include that area. That would be Claire Syrett and Greg Evans and Chris Pryor. Used to be my city council ward, Ward 6. All are optimistic about the placement of parole there, parole and probation there, because of the type of presence. Bethel feels burdened by excessive social services in Bethel. It's not the only part of town that does. However, the folks that I've spoken to about this, which includes Ty Pruce Zimmerman, who is the outgoing chair of Active Bethel Citizens, a local neighborhood group, realize that this is not a typical social service. This is actually a uniform presence in the area, which is going to enhance, in most people's minds, the presence of Lane County in the area. So it's, by and large, the reception's been good. Once the decision has been made, subsequent to the motion, then I'll take it upon myself to make certain that the businesses in the area understand the nature of the development. But thank you for the diligence you've placed on this. And I'm ready for a motion if
Go ahead.
that is desired. Then I have, Mr. Chair, I move passage of order 19-11-12-06 in the matter of authorizing purchase of real property for $3.150 million and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute documents necessary to complete the purchase.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Farr, seconded by Commissioner Buck to approve Order 19-11-12-06. Further discussion? Go ahead, Commissioner.
I can say just a little something. I know how this Four Corners really has had its challenges with a variety of businesses in that location. And it's, its proximity to both the Mission and down the street on Highway 99. I find that having, a uniform presence in that location will provide some stability for that corridor. And overall, the plan, provides enough space for them to be able to do their job productively and efficiently, which has a lot of problems at the moment. So I'm very supportive.
Thank you. So I'm really pleased about moving forward with this property purchase. Parole and probation has kind of been the ugly stepchild of Lane County for a while. It's been under 3 different departments since I've been here, passed around from department to department like a hot potato sometimes. And it's lived in some pretty poor buildings in the past. Everybody remembers the old elections building. So finally getting it a home that's efficient. And I think that's one of the big things we're looking at here is this is going to bring a lot of efficiency. We won't be paying for travel time for parole officers to get to and from, their self-defense training. We can do a lot of it in-house in that building. So, there's just a lot of just efficiency that goes with getting everybody in one place and getting them out of an unsafe building also, where they don't have good separation, and there's all sorts of other reasons why that building doesn't work well at the Sheriff's Department. And it's great to open up that building for the Sheriff's use. I'm hoping maybe we can expand our RLAND program, which is extremely successful in reintegrating folks coming out of prison and preventing recidivism in that space. But I'm really pleased about this and just pleased, our parole officers have, been through a lot of kind of being that stepchild and being passed around and being located in not so great places. But I'm really excited about some of the opportunities this property provides. It provides more space than we need just for parole and probation. It's going to allow us to possibly co-locate some of our other services that provide service to that population, like emergence and their addiction treatment folks, and sponsors is straight across the street, and the ability maybe to work with them. There are a couple other buildings there that we'll be taking ownership of that, also offer us other opportunities. I'd love to see maybe that restaurant be converted to something that maybe our MLK school gets involved with. There's just, a whole bunch of opportunities there. And currently the property's not really healthy for the neighborhood. I think Commissioner Farr sort of spoke to that, and that's why the city councilors all support this. But I just want to say this is really kind of a great moment, and it seems kind of antithetic, just a little bit of, not as big as it should be in some ways, that we're finally going to get a home for parole and probation and start, treating that service like it should be, because they're really about, not only keeping our community safe, but also about repairing people's lives. And that combination of the two is just really an important function of our Lane County government. No one else is doing that function. So thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Burney?
For what it's worth, I think this exemplifies for people, for the public, what a group of commissioners coming together can support and what a staff coming together can implement. Without Commissioner Farr's, who is there, it's his area, and without his saying that this is something that others approve and it seems as a net positive for the community, I would not be as supportive of this. Without Commissioner Bozovich's operational, structural understanding of relationships, of programs to others that the county has jurisdiction over, I would not have appreciated the efficiencies. I would have just looked at the price tag, $3.1 million, as much as I do. Now appreciate, within the context of where this county is going and the services we're providing the public, how significant this is. And I think the word, sir, was anticlimactic.
Yeah, I was stumbling over that, yeah.
And no problem. And not that we don't all share all of these concerns. One of the things that I've been really appreciative of, from Mr. Cheney in the General Counsel's office to Mr. Penwell with facilities, to Mr. Rickoff, to everyone, is the ways in which county staff have taken the board's cues regarding community benefit agreement components and the courthouse that as of now is not to be, but we shall see, and looked at and embraced the aspects of from prevailing wages to workforce diversity to health insurance provided, employer contractors and subcontractors, and other aspects to clean energy that this body embraced, and its application, as my understanding is, this will be a first implementation of that lens around a retrofit project. So for all, and by the way, as we're going to speak about items in the agenda, what that really also looks at in terms of local sourcing is you add all that up and you increase the multiplier of dollars flowing through the economy. So in addition to the service that we're providing and the efficiencies that we're creating, we're also intentionally multiplying dollars more than otherwise would be through the community for sourcing of materials, for local jobs, for young women and men getting into apprentice programs, for jobs right here. So you absolutely have my total support, and I've appreciated the process that you've taken the board through to get to this point.
Thank you so much. I'll just make a few comments too. First of all, I want to thank the staff that are here and many that are not here from our budget, legal, facilities, lots of different components, parole and probation itself, folks there. I just want to say that we don't get to a decision to obligate Lane County to $3.15 million unanimously without a lot of hard work by lots of other people before it reaches this public phase. I just want to acknowledge all that hard work. The other thing is that the people that work in parole and probation, you know, it's part counselor and part law enforcement. It's a specialty field where folks that are drawn to counseling may not like the law enforcement side, or people drawn to law enforcement may not like the counseling side. And so we have a lot of counselors and we have a lot of law enforcement. We don't have very many people that are in that important specialty of parole and probation. And it's a really hard job, but it's a very important one. And the role of the counties in providing these services with state assistance as part of an overall public safety system, it's really important. We just physically cannot afford to put every offender in jail and in prison forever, nor would it be a good thing for society to have that happen when many, many people can be successful on probation and on parole. And it's the job of our probation and parole officers to sort that out and make sure that most people are successful and have the tools and training to do it. So this facility is going to allow that to happen a lot easier and a lot more efficiently. And we're also want to highlight that we are buying this with general fund dollars, so that in the event that the state and the counties come to an agreement that this is a county function fully and should be supported by state dollars, we can continue it. But in the event that the state does determine that this is really a state function, and much like the state prisons or the state correctional facilities, then this facility is not tied to state funding and is purchased by the people of Lane County, purchased by Lane County government using our general fund. So I really appreciate staff's attention to that important detail, because having been involved in this issue myself over the last 30 years or so, both on the state side and the county side, I know it goes back and forth. And when I first started in this work, it was all state. It was not local at all. It was all state. Now it's local, mostly. Although counties to the north and south of us, it's run by the state. So it is a commitment, in a sense, on our part to say that we'd rather have it be a local function and have it locally integrated with our health and human services, substance abuse, alcohol abuse, mental health, and our Lane County Jail as all being a part of a local system of punishment, rehabilitation, and people getting back into society and contributing. So I really appreciate this. I appreciate all the hard work that everybody's done, and I'm really glad that we're doing this. And for those who are following this from afar, we are not taking $3.15 million out of some secret fund somewhere to buy this property. This is over, no, we're not. No, even some of the commissioners may not know that. We are not doing that. We are buying it over time because the family that's selling it wants it structured that way. So we are buying it over time, and I really appreciate all the great work. One final thing, and that is I want to second the idea that this is an opportunity to put this community benefit agreement concept into practice with a major project, and it's also an opportunity for us to show our commitment to sustainability, making sure that we have high energy efficiency, perhaps even energy production on site. And I think that's a real opportunity for us. And so anything further from commissioners?
Very quickly before the vote, Mr. Chair, just a brief historical economic note. Back in 1977, when I started work at Jerry's Ace Hardware, this property was the home to the larger and more established Four Corners Ace Hardware. So they're not there and Jerry's is. So.
So don't mess with Commissioner Farr. In that we have a 10 o'clock time certain, I'd like to call the question.
Okay, so let's vote first on cutting off the debate and moving to, all in favor of calling the question, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries unanimously. All those in favor of the motion as presented to approve order 19-11-12-06, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. And the order is adopted by a vote of 5-0. All commissioners voting in the affirmative. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, great job. And congratulations to Parole and Probation. Okay, so I'll ask Ms. Cummings and Mr. Ramirez and anyone else involved to come forward while I read this agenda topic, which is item 7A, Order 19-11-12-05, in the matter of awarding $80,000 to the Oregon Regional Accelerator and Innovation Network, RAIN, to be distributed over 2 years. With us to discuss this important matter is Austin Ramirez, Interim County and Economic Development Manager, and Caroline Cummings. By the way, are you Caroline or Carolyn?
Caroline, thanks.
Caroline, very good. Well, we'll try to do it right the next time. Yeah, sweet Caroline, very good.
I was thinking that. I wasn't going to say anything.
Caroline Cummings, the Oregon RAIN Executive Director. I guess as you're promoted here, you're going from local to state, and pretty soon you'll be national. And you want to sit down up here, too?
This patient gentleman is waiting to take my seat. I'm going to give it up, but I wanted to just, I'll do a longer introduction on when I continue my announcements, but Mr. Ramirez had a really long title of Interim Community and Economic Development Manager. We decided to take the interim off and make him the permanent. So we did a recruitment, and I'll share more about Austin's appointment, but I wanted to just introduce him as our new Economic and Community Development Manager for Lane County. I'll turn it over to Austin.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. And thank you all for the support.
And if you could introduce everybody at the table, that'd be great.
Yeah, so good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for your time today. Joining me is Caroline Cummings, Executive Director of Oregon RAIN. We also have two of our venture catalysts, Raj Vable and Ariel Rubin. They've all done great work and have been really fantastic with all of our rural communities that they work with. So today you're going to hear an exciting update about the great work they've done, the great work they will continue to do, and how they are expanding to more and more of our communities. They've been a longtime partner for us in bringing resources and capacity and assistance to rural areas that typically don't see those resources or capacity or assistance. And so we're really excited to see where they're going. We also have community partners from Veneta, Lowell, and Oak Ridge here, who will come up to talk about the impact RAIN has had on their communities in a little bit. At this point, I'm going to pass it off to RAIN to take it from here.
Great. Thank you, Austin, and congrats on the position. We're very excited for you and for the county. Good morning, Chair Sorensen and Commissioners. Thank you so much for allotting a generous amount of time on the schedule today, and I really do want to thank the city partners who have joined us today as well, because we're here to serve them and their communities. So first, I want to thank you for the support that you have provided over the last couple of years in supporting Oregon RAIN and the rural work that we do. We honestly could not do this work without your support, and the cities who are here will tell you that your match funding is really important to helping, and also helps us leverage funds from foundations and other funders. So quickly, I just want to share you what the agenda is. I will give an update on our focus, because that has changed since RAIN started, where we were initially focused on the accelerators in Eugene and Corvallis. As of October last year, our board has voted that we are 100% rural communities, small and rural communities. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll share some county successes. You'll hear comments from our community partners. Anne from the city of Coburg had wanted to be here. Unfortunately, she had food poisoning this morning. And then Rick with Veneta also was hoping to be here, but we do have Laura with Veneta Works here today. Rick was on his way in and unfortunately hit a deer, so we're bummed about that. And then we'll talk about funding and where we are with the state having pulled 100% out of funding our work, and where we are with other funders, and then questions. So the team was already introduced, but what I will say is the regions that they serve, and you're going to hear from them later today as well. Raj, who's sitting on the end, he is the venture catalyst representing the Lowell, Dexter, Oak Ridge, West Fur, Veneta communities. And then Ariel Rubin is representing the communities of Coburg, Florence, and then Cresswell also just recently joined, as did Coburg just about a month ago. So just to kind of set the stage of who we are and what we're doing, we partner with Oregon communities who want to catalyze an entrepreneurial ecosystem. So think about us as supplemental staff in the community to focus on building an entrepreneurial economy. That's basically how a lot of other communities view the work that we do. And the venture catalysts, the work that we do is we essentially, through partnerships with the communities, is find the hard-to-reach entrepreneurs. And by the way, without state funding, we are now able to serve any entrepreneur, not just traded sector. If you remember, we used to be tied just to that. Now we can help any startup, which is wonderful because in rural, we find more local sector companies. And we match them with people, programs, physical assets, and capital. And if you've ever seen the Simon Sinek TED Talk, which I highly recommend, he talks about how most of us leaders in societies, we talk about what we do, not why we do it. And so we think it's important to talk about the why. And the why is clear. We want to create thriving entrepreneurial economies in rural Oregon. We want to create exciting new businesses, net new job creation, and we want people to see rural Lane County as a growth gateway. And you guys are already experts in economic development, but just to give a quick refresher, most communities focus on 3 legs of the economic development stool: recruitment of new businesses, business retention, expansion, marketing the region for tourism. We don't do any of those. Our expertise is the 4th leg of the stool, which is the entrepreneurship and innovation piece. All 4 elements are important, but if you don't have that 4th piece, it's really difficult to have a balanced regional economic development strategy. And we've been doing this work since 2014, and we are fortunate to have been invited, which, as a reminder, we only enter communities who invite us in and counties who invite us in. We've been fortunate to be invited into 20 rural cities, 5 counties. Grant County is the newest. We're currently hiring a venture catalyst for them. For John Day, Prairie City, Canyon City. 3 foundations fund our work. Several private corporations fund our work. The federal government funds our work to create a $10 million seed fund to invest in companies in rural and overlooked communities. And then the state of Oregon was funding us up until this last biennium, and we can talk more about that later. So people sometimes ask, what is a rural venture catalyst? Who is Raj and Ariel and Corey, who we have over in Lynn and Benton? They're experienced entrepreneurs themselves. They've started companies, they've helped grow companies, and they're currently involved in startups themselves. And this is what they do. They take a systems-wide approach to your rural economy. They're boots on the ground. We don't have any infrastructure. They are out in the communities, working with the cities, working with the entrepreneurs, making sure they're attending chambers and rotaries and whatever community events are happening so that anybody who has an idea can make sure that we find them and match them with the resource. We're also tracking, there's 10 elements to a successful entrepreneurial economy. And in your packet, in the back, there's a scorecard where we rate the individual cities, and we also score the county itself on those. And you all scored, I believe it was a 32 out of 45. So we still have some areas for improvement, and you'll see some of those are workforce, training, mentors, and capital. So the venture catalyst, as well as myself, we're also out there making sure that we're catalyzing capital, we're catalyzing whatever is needed to build a truly thriving, sustainable rural Lane County. So here's what success looks like. I'm going to hand it over to my colleagues. The city of Florence, first of all, I love their tagline, a city in motion. Erin wasn't able to be here today, but I do know that she sent a testimony for the work. They are the community that's been with us the longest. And Commissioner Bozievich, you were there 4 years ago, almost to the day when we launched in Florence, and it's been thriving ever since. So thank you for your support. And I'm going to hand it over to Ariel to talk about one project that's happening in Florence that you may or may not be aware of.
Thank you, Caroline. Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Thank you so much for having us. It's been an absolute privilege and pleasure for me to serve the entrepreneurs in Florence and Coburg, and now Cresswell. Just like Caroline was mentioning, just wrapping resources around entrepreneurs has been amazing. As an entrepreneur myself, trying to find the resources that I needed was, very accelerated by having programs such as these. Florence Makerspace is one of our success stories on the coast. Patrick Looney, the entrepreneur, with our assistants, opened the Florence Makerspace, which is a space with 3D printers, digital printers, robotics, for all to learn of all ages. And we're really excited to get the high schoolers involved. They're just starting to come over and have classes there. And yeah, we're so excited. He's just about to create nonprofit status, and we're going to help him raise funds to be able to hire somebody and expand this model beyond what he already has. He has a wonderful space, and we've held many events there over the last year. Thank you.
And before you hand it over to Raj, can you briefly talk about the event that you have this Thursday?
Absolutely. We're really excited. We have Florence Entrepreneurial Activation event, and you all will have this in your packet. We have partnered with the city, the SBDC, the Chamber, and many others as sponsors to put on this event. It's a signature event where we feature many of the local entrepreneurs. And this year, I'm most excited to get the high school involved, as I mentioned. The ending will actually have a space for entrepreneurs to come up and pitch their business ideas. And we have like 5 high school students that are going to come and pitch their ideas as well. And we'll have an excellent panel with Austin Ramirez, as many others as well. So yeah, if you're in Florence next week, or this week on Thursday, we'd love to have you in 2 days.
Raj.
All right, Chair Sorensen and the Commission, thank you so much for having us. We appreciate the opportunity to share how your work is playing out in the communities that we work with. And I also want to say thank you to our county partners for coming. It's really an opportunity for us to be able to partner with such strong city leadership. And I have the privilege of working with Oak Ridge, Lowell, and Veneta. And so we wanted to share some of the success stories that come from each of those towns. And it's really exciting work because that support takes a lot of different forms depending on the businesses that we work with. In Veneta, which already had an established ecosystem to build off of, we got to work with one entrepreneur named Aida Lowe. She is creating a variety of food products based on traditional recipes from Mexico, her native country. And she was an entrepreneur who already had sort of taken the first steps in launching her business, but really she's a total go-getter. So what she needed from us was support and understanding what growth looks like. So I've had the opportunity to work with her to match her with different people, including graphic designers, marketing firms, and different funding opportunities. And then as she's getting ready to launch her wholesale program to get her delicious salsas into grocery stores across the county and the country, I've been working with her on developing what are called sales sheets, so the different types of marketing materials necessary to have meaningful conversations with buyers. And she represents, I think, one aspect of our work, which is very driven, opportunity-hungry rural entrepreneurs that just need the connections to resources, capital, people that we are in a position to be able to provide. Moving on to the city of Lowell, this is the launch of the Stomping Grounds Coffee Shop, which is the first community coffee shop in the town. There was one before, it had closed, and so the community was really lacking a space that people could come and get together. So in addition to helping Kristen, who's on the right, who's the owner, and Darcy, who's on the left, and the manager, get up and running, what we've been able to do is provide support for amplifying their success story. And actually, this has become a community meeting spot, and they've been able to host an event for a regional business network that we're helping to organize, sort of like a chamber of commerce, but a little bit more broad because it's a regional approach. And the other really exciting thing about their work is the number of jobs that they've created. They've hired 7 part-time students in the 2 months that they've been open, including 1 full-time FTE, which is Darcy on the left. And it's just to reiterate that really what they're doing is creating a sense of community, which is one of the valuable roles that small businesses play. And then finally, we'll go further up the mountains into Oak Ridge, where we have the youngest entrepreneur that we work with. Her name's Ayla Altimus. She's a 15-year-old who in the summer between her sophomore and junior year wanted to launch a kayak and stand-up paddleboard rental company. And I had the opportunity to work with her basically from the idea on through the execution and launch of her business. So everything from figuring out what is the value proposition, who are the target customers, how do we validate that those customers exist, through to how do you accept a credit card payment and how do you actually go through the process of transacting a sale. And she is representative of a new direction that we as an organization are moving, which Ariel touched on, but that's where our work at the school level. We've had the opportunity to work with Oak Ridge in developing and implementing their first curriculum targeting entrepreneurship. So the first time entrepreneurship is being taught at the high school level. And this is a quote from the superintendent of the Oak Ridge School District, Rita Dolan, who says that what she likes about working with us is that we're helping to unleash the entrepreneurial spirit of Oak Ridge High School students. So with that, I'll hand it back to Caroline.
Thank you, Raj. We really kind of wanted to give you a view into what it looks like in the work that we're doing and give some faces and success stories to this, because we're all so busy doing what we do, and getting to see them, I think, is valuable. Because of the work we're doing, we're also getting attention from different foundations who only fund organizations focused on DEI work, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And our organization has been working heavily on that. We had hired a consultant. We have a statement of philosophy. We've done trainings. And the Collins Foundation just recognized us by giving us a $50,000 grant over 2 years that focuses only on the rural Lane communities that we mentioned to you that we're serving, where we will do specific targeted outreach to youth and children, the Latinx community, and people with disabilities. So we're super excited about that, because what we've learned is you can't just say we serve everybody. You have to have a specific outreach and partnerships and trust built with organizations who are already working with them. So we're excited to be working on that, and then we'll come back and provide you updates on that as well. And then, of course, at the end of the day, as an entrepreneur and an investor myself, I care about ROI, right? What's the return on the investment for the money that you're giving? You all have a packet in front of you that is 17 pages long, so I'm sure you're going to love reading that over the next week or so. We want to be extremely transparent with you and give you all the data and all the metrics that we're tracking. This data is what we get directly from the entrepreneurs themselves. We survey them both through online and in person, and we're tracking job creation, we're tracking revenue they have, capital they've raised. If you notice, they still need to raise $4.5 million in capital, and it's actually even more than that, because out of the 86 companies, only about half of them took the survey, which is typical with the entrepreneurs that we work with. And what's really interesting is if they do raise that, they will create 71 more net new jobs. So you probably have heard me before talk about the Kauffman Foundation, who studies the economic impact of entrepreneurship in America. It's firms under 5 years old, startups in your own community, who are responsible for 98% of net new job creation. So that's why we do this work, right? And then I'd like to pause and invite our community partners up so that you can hear directly from them. And then when they are done, I will come back up and we will talk about money.
Now, we set this up for a 20-minute presentation and 10 minutes of questions from commissioners. How are you doing on your 20 minutes?
They started 5 minutes late.
So we're 15 minutes into our 20 minutes.
Good.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought we had 30 minutes, so that's why I had allocated that. So we will speed things up.
Okay.
Apologies.
We're doing good.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Commissioners and Commissioner Soren.
Pull that microphone closer to you.
I can do that, and I can try to lean into it. Is that better?
That's perfect.
Thank you for allowing us to come and speak. I'm the mayor of Oak Ridge, Kathy Holston, and I am pleased to be here and just tell you how important RAIN is to my community. We authorized them to come in and gave them money originally, and I will say it was rather with a hesitancy. We weren't sure what it was going to do, but when we discovered how RAIN embeds themselves in our community, as well as reaches out to entrepreneurs who had no idea that their little idea could become something, or even how to begin it, and the feedback we got from our community members made it an important part of what we want to do in our community as far as economic. They really do help the individuals who have an idea and how to expand it into something that is going to be meaningful as well as profitable for them and in turn for our community. So while I'll be brief, I just want to encourage you to support them. Our community supports them strongly. Our council just re-upped their contract, and we would hope that you would add to that. Thank you.
Chair Sorensen and Commissioners, my name is Laura McGinnis, and I am a Rare AmeriCorps member serving the City of Veneta as Veneta Works Coordinator. I'm here on, I'm not Rick Ingham.
Thank you for the clarification.
We do look a lot alike, I know. It's
We were sitting on the edge of our seat.
Did you bring venison?
The City of Veneta recognizes that creating a thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem is part of the path for developing a strong economy and sustainable, diverse economy in Veneta and throughout the Fern Ridge area. Oregon RAIN offers top-notch training, mentoring, and entrepreneurial support that makes it possible for Veneta to follow this path we've set out. And thanks to their continued financial support by the county and the match within the city, we are able to access the high-level economic development support that Oregon RAIN provides. And that wouldn't be possible without your support and our financial match to bring in this high-level support. So thank you. This past summer, as part of a grant from Business Oregon, Veneta opened a downtown pop-up district that provided retail space free of charge to selected vendors who are ready to take their business to the next level. Were it not for the work that Oregon RAIN and Venture Catalyst Raj in particular did through workshops, training, and working one-on-one with the vendors to prepare them for this 6-week pop-up storefront opportunity, the city would have struggled to fulfill the requirements of that Business Oregon grant. The pop-up district was a rousing success, and as a result, the vendors at the pop-ups are now ready to move on to their next stage of business growth. I do have examples, but we've already talked about AIDA and some others who are moving on to those next stages, which is fantastic. And these kinds of successes are only possible in rural communities by working together with partners like Oregon RAIN and our partners in the county and throughout the region and the state. So thank you for your continued support.
Thank you.
Chair Sorensen and Commission, thank you for this opportunity to share our experience with the board. The City of Lowell started an Economic Development Committee in 2017. Their first action was to tour our local businesses in our community with Kim Thompson of, at that time, the Lane County Rural Prosperity Initiative. This was an opportunity for the committee to learn more about the businesses that we had in Lowell, as well as to solicit feedback on ways that we could assist them with their work. Among the responses we heard were access to mentoring, technical support, and business networking. As a small city, we simply didn't have the capacity, staff, or funding to go it alone and provide these economic development services to our business community. Soon thereafter, however, we learned of Oregon RAIN and we invited them into our community. It's been an excellent fit. Caroline and Raj have provided many training seminars in our community on topics from entrepreneurship to business finance to social media marketing, as well as mentoring in both group and individual settings. And best of all, they did not come with a one-size-fits-all approach. I think that's one of the most important things that Oregon RAIN offers, is that even in a community of 1,100 people, they came and tailored their program to our community, as well as the Dexter and Fall Creek area. The setup of the organization has also allowed us to partner with all of these great organizations, from the Ford Family Foundation to Lane County, and also the city of Oak Ridge. Many smaller communities such as Lowell and Oak Ridge lack the financial resources to go this alone. And so it's extremely important that we have partners to assist us in this effort. This pooling of resources, has allowed us to contract with RAIN. And it's just critical, I think, to the provision of economic development services in rural Lane County. The city of Lowell funded RAIN $5,000 originally, and this year we're looking at increasing that to $7,500, which for a community the size of Lowell, that's a pretty large investment. And so we are very happy with the service that we've received. I can tell you that our entire council has been on board with RAIN from the beginning because we've seen the benefits of that. And speaking of that service, I think there are many ways to define and measure success. Oregon RAIN is really about cultivating and supporting a local culture of entrepreneurship. A culture where, yes, entrepreneurs have access to outside technical and financial support, but also a culture where entrepreneurs learn and support each other. And so one of the things that we've seen is that with Kristen Prinovost, for example, with the coffee shop, is that she hired a local graphic designer to assist her with her branding. Well, that in turn turned into that contractor getting a job with another business in town after she saw their work, which is Floral Living, a new flower shop in town. That owner's line and grind staff has also taken advantage of the services offered by Oregon RAIN and worked extensively with Raj, and crediting much of her success to training in social media that she received from Oregon RAIN. And so with that, we're just very excited to continue to work with Oregon RAIN, and we wholeheartedly thank you for your support.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. I know we're running a little behind. Caroline's going to talk a little about the funding, but we will be asking the board to authorize $80,000 to be awarded over 2 years.
Thank you very much, and thank you, community partners. Yes, so the last couple of slides here talks about the funding breakdown, and as I mentioned, we want to be very transparent. We're asking you to fund 19% of the total budget for the next 2 years for the county. And so you can see how we have it broken up into cities funding 23%, the majority foundations 19, federal 21. That's actually through 2 USDA grants we just recently received. The city of Florence received one. We received one for just rural. And the state 18%. That 18% for the state would be us going after additional monies from the Business Oregon ROI. So this is a budget. We don't know if we're going to be able to get that. We're hopeful of that. So to show you the comparison, Lynn and Benton counties, who also fund our work, they fund 30% of the budget for their region, and Lincoln County funds 25% of their region. So what we're asking you to fund is a little on par for where they are as well. And then this slide is extreme transparency. Anything in green is committed funding, anything that's yellow is pending, and anything that is in the red color is need to ask. So the total budget is there, and at the bottom are the expenses. The bulk of it goes to provide 2 full-time staff, which equates to 3 people. Raj is part-time. We want to hire a venture catalyst coordinator from one of the rural communities, so create another job, and then Ariel will move to full-time. The expenses to host events, the marketing, and then the overhead admin is a very small portion of that. So that's the breakdown of the funding. You can see under county, we are hoping to have $40,000 a year from you all. We've asked every single one of our partners, all 20 of the cities and the 4 counties, to increase their giving, as well as the foundations and the corporations. And so far, everyone has said yes to fill the gap, the funding gap. That was $500,000 that we had received from the state of Oregon. So that's the last thing I'll share with you is the additional return on investment that you get is that you can say you have a rural strategy for building your rural economies, that there's a culture of entrepreneurship and innovation in rural Lane County. There's an increase in startups and startup success rates, which we're also starting to track. There's a lot of media coverage that we get for the region, net new job creation, capital access. Not only are we putting a $10 million fund together, but also a micro grant for people who need a laptop that costs $1,000 and can't afford it because she's a single mom. We're putting those things together. And I'm also talking with the state of Oregon. I just met with Leah Horner, the governor's new jobs and policy person, last week to see if the state would step in and help put a platform together for that. And then lastly is we will continue to be transparent and give reports to you. So thank you for the time, and we will entertain any questions you might have.
Okay, do you want to say anything, Austin, before we start talking about all this?
You know, based on the great work they're doing and the expanded body of work they're going to be doing, we feel that the ask is validated and justified, and clearly our communities would like the county to keep supporting this. They do great work, and we're excited to see what they do.
Okay, great. So we'll get into discussion now from the Board of Commissioners. We set this up for a 10-minute discussion. Are any commissioners want to be recognized?
I just want to thank Oregon Rain and yourself for doing so much good work in our rural communities. As a small business owner myself, I fully understand the struggle and dedication it takes for small business owners to succeed. It's tough out there to start a business, and so many don't succeed because they don't have the kind of wraparound support that you're talking about here. I think it's fundamental to getting an economic driver within small communities that really need that small business support. People generally live, work, and play all in their small towns. It's not like big business is going to come in all that often in these small communities, so they really need to support themselves. And this is just an outreach way that I think is fantastic. I've come to several of the community meetings. I see how the businesses really wrap around each other and support each other. I think it's fantastic. I do have a question, which is on the sheet of challenges for the Lane County area, is capital investment, angel investors, and what we can do to help support that, because it takes some startup money, and for small businesses that's almost impossible just to get out the door. They're often in their backroom garages, and they need to be able to make it to a space on Main Street to really thrive. So how can we support that? How can we get the word out?
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. I really appreciate your comments, and I appreciate the question about the capital access. This has been the one thing that is a major gap in all rural in Oregon, not just in the metro areas. It's the overlooked populations, people of color, people with disabilities, women, and as an entrepreneur myself, struggled to raise capital. So I appreciate the question. One of the ways that you can help is, I mentioned the meeting with the governor's office that I just had. She also asked me to send her the platform that the state of North Carolina is using called Local Stake. What it would take to put this platform up and allow for crowdfunding, not only funds that anybody in this room could give $500, $1,000, or whatever to, but also anybody who's accredited could invest equity in a startup, and then also use the platform for grants. So for example, like Sweet Home in Lebanon and some of the other cities, and I know some of our cities here would be willing to put a couple thousand in or 500 in or something into a pot to be able to allow money for these communities. So the reason I brought it to the state level is because the state of Oregon has already passed legislation called OIO, Oregon Intrastate Offering, allowing for this. We just need someone to own the platform. So I sent her the estimate for that, and I sent her a mock-up of what that site would look like. How you all could help is to send a letter of support or send an email to Leah Horner and say, we have a scorecard with our partners, and we know that capital access is one of the lowest scored items for our communities. The rural community, the entrepreneurs in your communities will never probably get venture capital. They might get angel money from the seed fund, but first they need $50,000 to $75,000 in grant money to hire someone to build their prototype, whatever that might be. So I can send talking points over if that's helpful for you to send to the governor's office, because I know the governor is looking at making a decision within the next 12 months to make a move to help with capital access.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, do other commissioners want to ask questions or make comments? Commissioner Bozovich?
Just a quick comment, and if it's all right with the board, I'll also make the motion.
Okay.
I got started into politics basically running for LCC's board after my wife went through their small biz program.
Mm-hmm.
And, my interest there was to really, promote LCC's small biz program because of what I thought it could do economically, for the region. Like you mentioned, most of the new jobs are created by small businesses, but 50% of all small businesses fail in the first 5 years?
Yeah, it varies depending on if they're traded sector or local sector. If they're traded sector, it's about 75%.
Yeah. So there's still this huge failure rate. And if we could just change that by a few percentage points, they're creating all these jobs, yet they're going away rather quickly. If we can make those businesses be successful and starting at the entrepreneur level, there I am with words again.
I'll be quick.
Yeah. And getting them to maybe not make some of those missteps and helping them be successful is really important. And in the rural areas, it's important. As my wife went through that, she was kind of wondering about why she had to do all this human resources stuff and writing business plans, because at the time she was a Schedule C sole proprietor running a graphic design business. Little did she know that, about 15 years later, she'd purchase a business, have employees, have to write a business plan to get a credit line from a bank, all those things. And leaning back on that training she had from LCC all those years ago. And it's such an important piece of making our communities be successful, because we can recruit from outside, and we see how how much we've tried and been unsuccessful in trying to refill the old Hynix building, and the promises that have to get made around tax breaks and everything else. Growing our businesses locally is really where our success lies, particularly in rural areas, and supporting that. So with that, and with the success you've had in Florence that I've watched over the last 4 years, and I see the announcements come out constantly from you all and also from the chambers. I'm a chamber member about your events. You guys are just doing a great job. I'd like to move approval of Order 1911-1205 in the matter of awarding $80,000 to the Oregon Regional Accelerator Innovation Network.
Okay, so it's been moved by Commissioner Bozovich, seconded by Commissioner Buck to approve Order 19-11-12-05. Further discussion? Commissioner Farr?
Briefly, I support this. Jerry's, King Estate, Guarantee Chevrolet all started out as small rural businesses.
Thank you.
I've learned a bunch of new words for something that I think is as old as America, which is helping small businesses get started. I also would like to say that before I knew how to do business, and entrepreneurial, again, another term, but in terms of starting a small business, have started 4, 3 were very successful, and 1 was a total bomb. Before I did any of that, I worked for the Carter administration and the Economic Development Administration, a guy named Bob Ball, and I was going around the country to ghettos, barrios, and reservations, assisting with cash flow analysis, obtaining financing, helping with marketing, and I didn't know what I was doing. And I was helping these people that were giving their lives to this. I have a couple of questions. One is, could you put the slide back on that? And I also never knew the difference between a venture capitalist and a venture catalyst.
Happy to.
I'd rather hang out with venture capitalists, no offense.
We're on our way.
I know. The slide that said net what impact in Lane County?
This one, the ROI?
No, it says impact in Lane County.
Oh, the metrics. There we go.
That's okay.
Whoops.
I thank you for doing this. How much? What can you really define? What amount of those numbers would not be there were it not for your organization? Because my experience is that this is happening anyway. You guys are providing sort of a support.
You know, that's the million-dollar question. I would love to be able to say that. I don't have a magic 8-ball to look into to see which of these companies wouldn't have started or would have failed. I can only tell you the quotes that we have, the testimonies that we have from the entrepreneurs that we serve, and we are about to release an impact report that I'll mail to each of you that has more of that from the companies. Most of the companies we serve say they wouldn't be where they are today if it wasn't for our help, or they would have failed. And in particular, getting the capital and the mentors that they need, they'll just give up. And so we hear over and over and over again, in particular from the female entrepreneurs and the females and the entrepreneurs of color, that they have confidence now to do this, whereas they wouldn't have even done it. They would have kept the idea in the little sketchbook, or they would have stayed in their kitchen making their gluten-free cookies and never putting it out there.
So you have anecdotal evidence, but you really can't quantify, even though these numbers are numbers that are justifying the request.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, they're from the entrepreneurs. I guess what we could do is
I'm not being critical. I'm just asking
No, I think it's a great question, and it's a difficult one to answer. The last part I will say is, because it's not data from us, the Kauffman Foundation, as I mentioned, who studies this and has studied this for decades, they did a study that said that companies who have wraparound support, like what we do, have an increased success rate by 90%, 90%. So we could speculate, right?
No, I appreciate that. If I may,
Yes.
Okay. I would like to share with all of the RAIN staff a project that occurred in North Carolina, because you mentioned North Carolina. In Asheville, North Carolina, the Asheville Chamber Economic Development Director, whose life had been spent chasing smokestacks and creating incentives to bring large corporations to Asheville, got a grant, and that grant was to develop roads that did not impact in the Appalachian areas, that took tourists, with maps that took tourists to the sole proprietorships that were artists that were hand making various goods. And they provided tremendous data that I think would help you in something that to me is a little bigger than I'm hearing in terms of aggregate impact. How will RAIN, given its focus, support entrepreneurs utilizing community benefit agreements to just exponentially increase the number of entrepreneurs that are contracting with the county?
What is a community benefit agreement?
Okay, now's not the time, but it's critical to coordinate with this stuff. Just like it's critical to coordinate with chambers of commerce, which I'm sure you do.
We already are.
Of course. And with LCC Small Business Development Center, which I'm sure you do.
We do.
And with ideally transferring what you do to those institutions that have stable funding, because you don't have to keep asking people for money. But real quick, we'll talk later, but a community benefit agreement has local hiring components and prioritizes hiring local businesses for sourcing materials.
Oh, I'm aware of that. I didn't know that's what it was called.
Right, but it creates an infrastructure that you guys can feed into. And finally, last question, and this is directed to our ex-interim economic development manager. And I'm sorry you lost the job, Austin. As I remember, we're looking at the background material. This board is presented twice a year, progress reports. This is my first, I think, after 10 months. So, and this is a request for 60%, I think. Is that about right? More support from the county than in the last two requests. And I have yet to hear a hard justification for why coming from the person that's making the request.
The first 2 years that refunded RAIN was a total of $50,000, and the second 2 years of funding we did was $65,000.
I read 50,000, then I read that this year you added 15,000 to that.
We added that 15 to help supplement Veneta. Veneta had another provider not be able to continue those services, and so RAIN stepped in at the last minute and we-provided that additional 15.
Right, so 50, one decision, 50 another decision. Can you share with us why now you're adding 60% to that?
We've had more communities sign up, and so to increase, or actually to maintain the current level of services, but to more communities, they need additional funding. The other thing is the lack of state funding. That was a huge blow to their overall budget. And so that explains the increase in the ask. We've talked to Caroline, and the idea is as the state hopefully returns as a funder, that the county can decrease funding levels over the next few years.
Well, I'm going to support the motion. So I don't want you to think my questions are critical, and yet at the same time, I think it's good to dig a little deeper, and that was the intent.
Great, thank you.
Well, I too want to support this order and appreciate all the hard work that went into this by you, Mr. Ramirez, but also especially all of our presenters and people from RAIN. I know that one of the outstanding business success stories I think that we have in Lane County is some people that thought you could improve performance if you build a better shoe, a track shoe. And they started out of, the workshop and the waffle irons that were destroyed in the process, and finally got some shoes and prototypes and started loading them in the back of cars and taking them around to high school and college track meets. Of course, that story is a phenomenal story of how a local set of entrepreneurs can really promote an idea and then launch it into a company, and then over decades keep that company going. And that's a whole other area of economic development, right, of how those traded sector companies do. But I think we're on the best path here, and that is to deal with the here and now of how do we find those entrepreneurs? How do we find those people that are really out there already that have great ideas, and how do we, and I almost think of this as like the David Letterman show or the Johnny Carson show or the Trevor Noah show, and that is they have a staff of 30 joke writers, and each one of them have to come up with at least 100 jokes a day. And each one of those 30 joke writers, those comedians, come up with 100 jokes a day. And then they sit around and decide, okay, we got 3,000 jokes here to use for Trevor, and he's going to tell like 5. So it's the ones that matriculate to the top. And that's what we're really talking about. Thousands of great ideas out there, some of which will be a 1 or 2 person business, and it'll be fine. And that's where it'll be, and it'll go for 20 years or 30 years, and everybody will be happy doing it. It won't jump into the big numbers that we're kind of looking for as far as, well, what will be the breakout companies and breakout ideas? But by providing this assistance, which you guys are doing such a great job with, and I really appreciate the direct answers to the questions of, well, how much of this would have been done anyway by Bill Bowerman in his workshop, or how much it would have been because of assistance. And I just remember thinking about some people over in Whitaker that were going around to local stores and fast food restaurants and getting grease. And then they figured, well, maybe we could figure out a way to use this, and hey, yeah, it'll be great. We can make a biofuel. And well, that company is Sequential Biofuels, and it was started literally 10 blocks from here in a rented garage. The people that started it didn't even own the garage. I mean, they didn't even rent the garage. They rented the garage from the homeowner who was renting the garage to them. They didn't even have the whole house. And so that's a business now that, employs people, is been fully functioning for probably 20 years, and it's a great example of some local business. My big question, I'm fully supportive of what you're doing, and you've heard most enthusiastically, of course, from the commissioners that represent the communities you're working in, but my question is more of a policy question, and that is and could you put up that slide of the 3 and then the 4 legged stool.
Yes.
That is really the essence of my question. And that is, we've got, if you go one back, right, you'll get the 3. Yeah, no, one more. Oh, no, I guess that's it.
Yep.
You have 3 labeled stools, right? There it is.
There it is.
You got the 3 legged stools, and you got marketing for tourism. You've got business retention, and you've got recruitment of other businesses that are going elsewhere. And then, and I think that characterizes kind of economic development policy in this community, broadly stated, for the last 30, 40 years even. And I think when you add, and go ahead and add, your entrepreneurship and innovation, it's really something that adds to the total effort and may well eclipse the total effort because of the success if we provide just the help that your catalysts out there are providing to these businesses. And I just want to, and my question really is, you premised, Caroline, your remarks with, we're really looking to serve these rural communities, which definitely is music to the ears of your 2 of your 5 commissioners up here who dominantly represent rural communities. But what are the cities doing, and what can the county do to help cities, and what can we do to get RAIN invited into Eugene and Springfield, and is there already a competitor of RAIN in Eugene and Springfield, and maybe Albany and Corvallis, the other communities you're around? So could you talk a little bit about that? Because I think some of us up here would like to see public policy directed toward entrepreneurship and innovation in the cities that we serve.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for the question, Chair Sorensen. So currently on our board right now, Mayor Vinnis and Mayor Traber from Corvallis are serving on our board. They're cycling off in June as we recruit a new board to be more representative of rural and underserved in Oregon. That said, our board voted for us to focus specifically on small and rural communities. We have been invited into Albany. I forget what Albany's population is, but they're higher than rural numbers when you look at USDA.
They're bigger than Cottage Grove, but
Right.
smaller than Springfield.
Right. And so our charter does not dictate population size. It just says small and rural. We would love to provide more services. This model works, it could work in Silicon Valley. It doesn't matter the size, it just gets tweaked. As Jared from Lowell was saying, it gets tweaked based on the community. And I have talked with Vani from the Springfield Chamber, who would love to have this model there. Because
Who's doing this in Eugene and Springfield?
the ecosystem building, I would defer to Austin on this one.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. Eugene especially has Eugene RAIN, which is a different organization at this point with its own accelerator. Eugene and Springfield also have access to more resources like the SBDC. RDI has a more active presence in the metro areas, which is another provider.
RDI, Rural Development Initiatives, has a big presence in the metro area?
They tend to bring resources to them. While they do some work in rural, you tend to have to travel to them in a lot of cases. And what makes Oregon RAIN completely different is they go to you wherever you are.
Do we provide funding for Eugene RAIN?
Not at this point. No, Eugene RAIN is going through a bit of a transition and figuring out what they're doing. But the resources in the bigger cities are just much more accessible, and they're there. And so entrepreneurs that are in those cities can access them easier, whereas entrepreneurship resources in rural areas are incredibly hard to find.
I think the 90% figure, though, that Ms. Cummings mentioned, it applies to urban as well as rural, and that's a concern of mine. But that is all topics that we'll get into tomorrow when we bring up our economic development work session at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. And Ms. Cummings, I know you're really busy, but if you could just watch a little on TV, that might be interesting for you as well. It's an hour-and-a-half work session on community and economic development. We're having it at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Great, thank you.
And for those of you traveling around helping entrepreneurs, available online as well. So at this time, I think we'll take any final comments, and then we'll take a vote, and we'll let you guys get out and create some more jobs.
Just briefly, our return on investment slide deviates slightly from the one you showed on the screen.
The one in the deck here compared to the one you have there? Yes, that was up to, sorry, we didn't get a chance to reprint those. Yeah, good eye, though.
All right, so
The one in your, sorry, the
further
one in your
comments? Go
packet
ahead.
is the one in your packet is the correct data. And on the.
I wanted to thank you, Caroline. I've always thought transparency was important, and now I've learned that there's such a thing as extreme transparency.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There you go.
We'll talk about the gradations of transparency.
I like the transition of the Jersey girl to rural Oregon. That's what I like.
Hey, I'm from rural New Jersey.
There you go, the Garden State. All right, so all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The motion carries unanimously. The order 19-11-12-05 is adopted. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate your support.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, and let's see, is Mr., yes, he is. Mr. Kyler is here, so we can take your two items. It's now 11 o'clock, almost 11 o'clock, so we have an estimated 30-minute item, which is 15 minutes of presentation and 15 minutes of board discussion, and that's item 7C, Order 19-11-12-07, in the matter of adopting recommendations of the Lane County Legislative Committee. So we'll take that item up now, and then after we finish that, we'll take up the Council of Forest Land Trust, Council of Forest Trust Land Counties voting delegate issue. And so on the first item, item 7C, Mr. Kyler, if you could make your presentation, we'd really appreciate it.
Thank you, and good morning, Commissioners. So today, I am giving you a report back on the county's legislative committee meeting, which occurred on October 24th. We had quite a bit on the agenda that day, and most of which is coming back to you in the form of the revised principles and priorities document. As you recall, that's a fairly dynamic document that the legislative committee continues to examine, and we particularly examined it during the October 24th meeting because there were a number of things that that changed as a result of the 2019 Oregon legislature. So we added a few new principles, and we added a few new priorities and took some of the old priorities off. The agenda included a couple of items that I wanted to bring to your attention, one of which is strictly sort of housekeeping, but we're going to endeavor to do sort of align ourselves better with the Lane Manual and make sure that we actually do have bylaws for the committee. We do keep minutes, but we will have a better process for minutes adoption in the future. I did also go over a little bit of a recap of the 2019 session. I have done some, I provided you, the board with sort of an immediate report on our individual priorities post-session. So I did that. There was also, I've done some departmental specific recaps for departments about bills that are more pertinent to those departments. And then finally, also we do have the AOC's Legislative Summary, which is a document available from the Association of Oregon Counties. There was a couple things that we did that will, if you approve, will sort of set in motion some work that will occur in Salem for some legislative priorities that could evolve. And I'm speaking, I think, to attachment, I think I've got it in here as attachment B, and that is an effort to take a look at the Oregon Seismic Rehabilitation Grant Fund Program. This is a grant that is administered by the Oregon Business Development Department. The legislature has appropriated I believe it was $120 million for that grant program, so pretty significant investment for the coming biennium. We had thought about using it for, potentially using it for at least part of the new courthouse, but are finding that because of the way that grant program was formed with the term rehabilitation in it, it really is designed for more remodels and not new construction. And so we discussed at the Legislative Committee potentially taking a look at that. It was an act that was adopted by Oregon voters and then sort of tweaked by the Oregon legislature. And so one of the things what we were recommending to you is that you give me authority to go seek a legislative opinion about what those words actually mean. Rehabilitation is pretty much not defined, and so we're, with a legislative council opinion, would give us sort of a guidance to whether to move forward with seeking a legislative change to that or just leaving it alone. So, Mr. Chair, with your permission, I think I'll just jump into some of the specific changes to the legislative principles document, principles and priorities document. This is attachment A in your packet. So one of the very first things we did was just move some existing language there on page 1. I thought it was a better fit to move it there, but it's the first highlighted thing you see on the document, which are legislative priorities shall address issues directly relevant to or impacting the provision of county services. This is sort of the underlying principle that guides my work to make sure that as we take a look at pieces of legislation that either we're involved with or get presented to us, that it really does have a nexus to the operations of the county. We also amended just a little bit about how staff may act during a session and to make sure that any advocacy that staff does is actually first cleared with me and is in alignment with these principles. The whole idea behind the principles document was to give staff a little bit more flexibility to ensure that what they were doing is in alignment with this document that's adopted by the Board of County Commissioners. So moving on, there were a couple specific changes that we are trying to do. One of the things is I'm trying to make it as short as possible. No, I don't really want this thing to turn into a book. So we're eliminating a principle here under public safety, not because it's a bad principle, just because it was duplicated by a principle 2 bullets in front of that one. So it's just sort of trying to constantly maintain that this thing is as streamlined as possible. The next one that we are adding a principle, suggesting that you add a principle under Health and Human Services, which is support efforts that seek to improve services for maternal and infant health. I'm not sure why we didn't have that principle to begin with. I know we've worked on that issue in the past, but there was a particular item that came up where staff was wondering if we could comment on a bill that I think is in the federal milieu, and I was like, oh, we don't have that as a principle, so we're suggesting that one. We're also taking a look at, with the work that our emergency manager is doing, we really wanted to sort of bolster out our efforts around disaster response and in particular disaster mitigation. So again, trying to move our priorities, which previously, or principles previously, which were sort of based on post-disaster work, to really now recognize the impact of pre-disaster mitigation. And then we spent a little bit of time talking about climate change, and so we've got a new set of principles that I think will continue to evolve. But what I was trying to do with this particular set was really went through House Bill 2020, which was the initiative that took up much of the Oregon's Legislative Assembly's attention during 2019. Did not ultimately pass, but I went through that bill and really trying to tease out the issues that were most important to counties. And so there's a couple there. Number one is the funding. So anything that is related to vehicular ownership is a tax that is related to vehicle ownership is governed by Article 9 of the Oregon Constitution. And what the county lobby was attempting to say during the 2019 session is, look, if you're going to tax vehicle ownership, make sure those funds, even if they're for decarbonization of the transportation system, must still be applied related to Article 9. And so we've tried to sort of encapsulate that in the first bullet. We also took a look at, there was a section of the bill that had to do with landfills and methane emissions from landfills. And so we are recommending that we continue to be able to do that work. And then finally, I think we've got an opportunity in Lane County that from methane reduction at our landfill to participate in certain kinds of future funding activities that may result from a cap and trade program. And so I tried to encapsulate that work as well to make sure that we're on, sort of solid footing going into, and it could be as early as 2020 to see some more work done on the climate legislation in Salem. Next, we talked about possible bill introduction. And as I clarified for the committee, I'm really not going into the 2020 session necessarily with something that the county would seek to be introduced. More so, 2020 provides for a person in my position a great opportunity to sort of bring some issues up, see what else is happening, and sort of try to gauge the temperature of the legislature and see if it's heading in sort of the same directions that we want to head with certain kinds of measures. So this is not an exhaustive list, but it sort of positions us to take advantage of those relationships in Salem and try to move the ball for
Like
2021.
martial arts. Good job.
Yeah. So first off, wanted to make sure that there's been a lot of discussion in the Oregon legislature about tax credits, and some legislators really want to continue to have tax credits. Other legislators don't want to continue to have tax credits. And sort of what that has resulted in is the Revenue Committee, particularly the House Revenue Committee, taking a look at all the tax credits and establishing a much better review of those credits, and particularly as they approach sunsetting. So one of the ones that you'll see here is speaking to the development of renewable natural gas facilities and whether there will be credits, tax credits for those kinds of facilities, and particularly from a public agency's perspective. If there is a tax credit, we don't get to take advantage of it, but we do get to transfer, called transferability, and that's typically where we provide our tax credit to another entity in exchange for money. So that's what we're trying to do with this piece, is to sort of position ourselves to make sure, okay, if we're going to be able to do something with renewable natural gas, how might public agencies, sort of experience the same benefit from that as a private corporation. A couple others that are also, or one more that's also related to renewable natural gas is Chapter 459 has a series of credits for, or menu choices for communities as they implement recycling programs, and particularly sort of thinking about the kinds of vehicles that renewable natural gas is most pertinent for. Garbage trucks come to mind, and recycling equipment. These are large trucks with a lot of starts and stops. And so there may be some ability for us to get into that, to look at providing a menu choice for communities that could serve to meet their recycling rate by having a credit for fleets that are fueled by renewable natural gas. And then finally, and this one goes back to conversations that we had really as a result of the resolution that Oregon Recovers brought to us and the meeting that you had with Senators Beyer and Manning, trying to get at this question of how public health receives funding for preventing addiction. We get, through our mental health contracts, money for treating addiction, but this upfront work that public health does so well in terms of prevention is really not all that well funded. We talked a little bit about potentially beer and wine tax as part of that conversation, and I think that this priority would get us more into that conversation about how to make sure that we've got adequate funding for prevention activities. So I think that sums up the changes to the principles document, priorities and principles document, and that's really the meat and potatoes of your order that is in front of you, is to accept the changes as
Okay, thanks very much. I know Commissioner Farr and I are on the committee, participated, and appreciate all your hard work, Alex, on it. Couple of things on my mind. Number one, I think we should approve this. Number two, we've got the NACO Legislative Conference coming up, and so which commissioners are interested in going to that? Okay, potentially.
Annual conference, yeah.
The annual conference. No, I'm talking about the legislative conference. NACO.
Where?
It's in Washington, D.C. It is in late February, early March of 2020. Yes. Potentially.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm a committee member as a
Okay.
chair of the public safety. Sit on
Maybe. I would rate then these answers as being, we need to make sure that commissioners are getting in touch with Ms. Jones regarding hotel reservations, and by the way, I probably maybe moving to unlikely in light of the large number of commissioners showing an interest. But I think commissioners that want to go to that conference or think they're going to go, now is a better time, i.e. later today, tomorrow, to email both Mr. Kyler and Ms. Jones to get going with your plane reservations and your conference registration. That'll also help the agenda team in whether or not we're going to have a board meeting that week or not, in light of the large number of commissioners who might be going to it. So let's get moving on that. Secondly, on my mind is Mr. Kyler, in his legislative role, is putting together the United Front trip, and I'm planning to go on that trip, and he's been very helpful, thank you, to arrange for that trip. And we do know that the cities are also participating in LTD in that. And then last but not least, I wanted to bring up something relevant to the committee's work, and that is, this is one of these transition comments I'll be making over the next year or so, and that is, I'm on the legislative committee. I like being on the legislative committee, but I think when we are doing this work in December or January regarding who's going to be on what committees, the board might want to think about having another commissioner besides me on the legislative committee. The reason being, not that I don't want to be on the legislative committee, but rather it'd be nice if whoever's on the legislative committee in 2020 were to continue into 2021 when the legislature's actually in session, and I won't be here then, so this would be an example of a kind of a transition planning to get somebody in addition to Commissioner Farr on the committee. So I'll highlight that. And otherwise, I think everything that we did in the committee is in the recommendations, and at the appropriate time we can get a motion to approve it. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, you're absolutely right. Although we had on the agenda to really try to focus in on the NACO resolution process, which unfortunately we did run out of time on too. I think we will plan on having another legislative committee before the short session, and I think at that point in time I will be proposing a NACO resolution, if that doesn't even, if we still run out of time for it, I think we will have to bring it forward to the board as an independent item before that. But I think what we have done in the past with NACO has actually been pretty consistently bringing forward resolutions that there's a very interesting process at NACO to vet these resolutions that are initiated by individual counties that become part of their sort of national platform. We've done some really good work on the intersect between privacy and sort of public safety needs by looking at how a couple federal regulations around healthcare privacy also serve to impede better ability to identify those who are really in need, for example, our FUSE project. And then this last time brought forward that the MERS, the Mortgage Electronic Registry System resolution, another really good national issue for counties. So I will endeavor to prepare you for that trip with a resolution in hand.
And for those who are knowledgeable on this, I'll just gloss over, but for those who haven't done it, those NACO resolutions are done annually, and so they're proposed at the legislative conference by the committees. So getting them approved by the committees at the legislative conference in late February, early March in Washington, D.C., then they're taken to the summer national NACO meeting. So you can't just get it passed in the summer. You have to have it passed by the committees in the late winter, early spring. So that's why it's important. Commissioner Farr and I have been very involved in that process over the years, and it has resulted in some very positive things where Oregon ideas or Lane County innovations have been turned into national NACO resolutions. Any other questions from committee members or from the board generally on the, okay, Commissioner?
I just had a comment. Yeah, I'm supportive of the changes, but I just wanted to say this list of our priorities is quite extensive. And it reminded me of our discussion earlier on our strategic planning. And do we really want this huge laundry list of things to be working on in the next session? Or do we want to target items within the list as higher priorities? It just seems if we're going to try to go through everything in the next session that we may not have a strong base on certain ones that we really should be concentrating on.
It's certainly a fair commentary. We got a very large organization. A lot of stuff is bubbling up from the agencies within Lane County and departments. They're following hundreds of legislative issues, and I think it's a good point. Somebody's issue in the sheriff's office isn't somebody's issue in the parole and probation or tax, and so there's lots of priorities. So you're right, there's a lot of priorities, but it's a very diverse organization.
Chair Sorensen and Commissioner Buck, I want to just make sure when I use the terms principles and priorities. So priorities would be a piece of legislation that we might seek to actually get introduced. And as a result of my presentation today, there's really only a handful of those. We might seek to get some stuff introduced around changing that funding to ensure that there's better prevention work for addiction treatment. We might get involved in that in some of the discussions on climate. The list that I think you're referring to of the long list of issues is really the principles document. And the principles document is important, but the way we use it is where staff gets pulled is that I'll be in the hallway in Salem and someone will say, hey, Alex, can you come and meet with Senator Beyer with us? And in the past, on such and such a bill, right? And in the past, I would say, well, I haven't really taken that bill in front of my Board of County Commissioners. And so what this instead of creating sort of all that process that goes along with it, what we try to do with the principles is set the stage for, okay, this is generally what we are for or against, and then we give staff a bit more flexibility with respect to say, sure, I can definitely go sit in on that meeting with you, right? And so it's not that we're going to pursue something that's a principle necessarily. You will always see that as a priority. So just to make sure you're completely clear on what those terms are. If we're going to go seek to have something introduced, it's a priority. If we're going to be in Salem and respond to things that are being testified on anyway, it's a principle. Hope that helps clarify.
I understand the concept. I just think that maybe from the way it's presented, it doesn't necessarily come across that way.
Yeah.
It looks as if all those things are things that we're going to go after in the session for a priority. And I just think there might be a better way to maybe either state that or present that.
The other thing we do, when we do go into, for example, the long session with a list of priorities, we will typically tier those priorities as well. So we will say, I mean, great example, courthouse funding, you know, that was at the top. That was a tier 1 priority. Some of the other things sort of fell into tier 2 or tier 3 priorities. Like, okay, it'd be nice to get. We'll work on it, but it's not as important as the tier 1 priority. And to your point, I mean, and you've heard me say this before, but I mean, I have capacity to manage, in terms of priorities, probably 5 or 6 bills to try to get actually passed. Going beyond that, it becomes quite a bit of work to manage more than that. But like I said, I do get called into all kinds of efforts as the session evolves, and that's where the principles document has really helped. The principles part of the document has helped.
So we can, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Buck, I think that's a good suggestion. We can look at the sort of how that material is presented to make sure that it's clear to people that are viewing it, that the priorities list are things that we're proactively working on versus the principles list is really giving, as Alex said, the flexibility to staff and elected officials to respond to issues really quickly in the moment without having to come back to the board. All of this is new in the last few years. We really spent a lot of time trying to get these documents pulled together because we were finding that Alex and other staff were really hamstrung in their ability to respond to what's a very fast-paced, fast-moving legislative system. And so I think that our view is it's worked really well, but if we still need to improve upon the how it's presented so that people are clear about, again, what's proactive and what's more responsive, we certainly can do that.
Okay, Joe? Pat?
First, I think it's great to be clear, but I also appreciate now having gone through one legislative session with you, Alex, how I get it. You have to have some sort of ability to not be micromanaged and yet understand the framework. So you have my support. I just have 2 questions.
Sure.
And forgive my naivete with these questions. What is renewable natural gas?
So, Chair Sorensen and Commissioner Burney, so this last session there was Senate Bill 98, which was for the first time allows a natural gas utility to buy a fuel that is not leased on a least cost basis, right? So previous to Senate Bill 98, natural gas had to, for interest of ratepayers, they had to purchase the cheapest natural gas out there. As that field of renewables has evolved, and we've participated in it indeed at our landfill, where we have an agreement with EPUD to burn the methane, natural gas, that is produced. For the first time now, landfills, wastewater treatment facilities, dairies can actually put that into a pipeline, and Northwest Natural Gas could actually pay for it. above least cost.
No, thank you very much, because in fact, that is renewable natural gas, and I thought it was going to be a play on words, but, and we don't, I think if you ask Mr. Hurley, he would like to capture much more of that methane than we do capture currently, and my understanding is some of the work that you've put before us in terms of sewer lines and water lines are going to facilitate that process, so that makes eminent sense, and I think that's great.
And I'll just tell you as an aside, Commissioner, we were at the MWMC the other day talking about the Goshen pipeline, and there was, following us, there was a presentation on the work that's being done at the River Avenue Treatment Works, where they're capturing renewable natural gas.
That's great.
And I happened to talk to one of their consultants afterwards, and I was realizing, like, I'm just scratching the surface with this new sort of work. There are methane emission reduction credits that are out there. There's a lot of things that I think, you know, as a legislative affairs manager for an organization that runs a landfill, I was like, oh, this is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
He's a good person for you to know.
yeah.
No, that's great, thank you. And then my other question is, pre-disaster mitigation could mean so many things. Is there some clarity about that, or what people are meaning by that in their use of the term, especially when you talk about changing directions, you know, from after to before?
Commissioner Sorensen, Commissioner Burney, I'm not the expert in that. I mean, I did ask Patience. I said, look, we definitely need to get some of this. She's got a pretty interesting thing that, remember, I talked about it at the meeting with Senators Senators Beyer and Manning, where, you know, she says, look, $6 for every dollar you spend on mitigation, you save $6 of post-recovery work or post-event work. So I think really I think the example that I outlined in the attachment B about looking at the Seismic Rehabilitation Fund in a way sort of gets at that, right? Instead of saying, okay, we are going to only spend money in Oregon on facilities that we retrofit, when the reality of it is, and our courthouse is a great example, retrofitting anything in the basement of the courthouse is probably not a great use of public resource compared to the cost of building it from scratch across the street. And so we're trying to sort of say, hey, there are new ways to look at seismic and disaster-related issues.
That's your sense of what pre-disaster mitigation means? Okay.
Preparedness.
Right. I'd like to introduce a concept, and then I'll be done. And that concept is a different way of looking at pre-disaster mitigation, and this is like way down the road. But if you look at the cost differentials between retrofitting a lot of key facilities that exist and roads and bridges to get people there in disasters and telecommunications, I'm going to suggest we start looking at community-based net zero plus facilities that people have direct access to in communities that actually become evacuation centers with their own electricity stored in batteries, freezers run by that electricity, et cetera. But that's for later. But thank you very much. It just fits under the notion of pre-disaster mitigation. And thank you for your clarification.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the order as presented.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. As a member of the committee, I'll go ahead and make the motion. Mr. Chair, I move to adopt Order 1911-12-07 in the matter of adopting recommendations of the Lane County Legislative Committee.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
And moved by Commissioner Farr, seconded by Commissioner Buck, to approve the order 19-11-12-07 as presented. Further discussion? Seeing, go ahead.
I'll just quickly say I want to thank the committee for continuing to focus our legislative priorities on matters of county concern and allowing me to be able to vote in support of this motion.
Yep. Very good. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries unanimously. All commissioners present voting in the affirmative. Thank you very much. We now have to item 7D, which is Order 19-11-12-08, in the matter of designating a voting delegate for the Board of Commissioners. Let's see. Well, let me read it right. In the matter of designating a voting delegate for the Board of Directors election, position number 5 at the Council of Forest Trust Land Counties. We do this annually ahead of the meeting of the fall meeting of the Association of Oregon Counties, and during that set of meetings will be the meeting of the Council of Forest Trust Land Counties, of which Lane County is one of the members of the Council of Forest Trust Land Counties. We need to have somebody designated to be the voting delegate, and usually that is the West Lane Commissioner, because that's where most of the land is located. And with us to discuss this is Alex Kyler. Feels free to augment or correct anything I've said.
Okay, you're right, Commissioner, you do this annually. I did include the bylaws for the Council of Forest Trust Land Counties so that you can sort of see it's in Article 5 of that document. What you are being asked to do is create a delegate to the election for position number 5 on the Board of Directors. And so that delegate will be voting on behalf of Coos County, Douglas County, Josephine County, Klamath County, and Lane counties. So each of those counties will have those members present. They will cast their vote for a delegate or a Board of Director position for the Council on Forest Trust Land Counties from that region. So it's sort of a convoluted construct. I hope I've described it adequately. And the way that we've done this in the past, at any rate, is that in public session, you nominate somebody to be that delegate, and then Diana Jones will insert that person into the official board order. However you word the board order, you'll want to make sure that you've designated a commissioner whose name is not blank, but is an actual person for
Unless their name is
of this action, which will occur November 21st at the AOC conference.
Is the board order we're looking at the one that would be presented?
It is, other than, yes, it will.
Other than the blanks.
Have the name inserted there.
Okay, so I'd like to entertain a motion to approve it with the name. Commissioner Farr?
Chair, I move approval of Order 19-11-12-08 in the matter of designating a voting delegate for the Board of Directors election position 5 of the Council of Forest Trust Land Counties, inserting Commissioner Jay Bozovich in the blank spaces.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Farr, second by Commissioner Buck to approve Order 19-11-12-08 with Commissioner Bozovich's name as the voting delegate at the Council of Forest Trust Land Counties. Motion having been made, seconded. Is there further discussion?
Commissioner, would you accept this honor?
Yes, and it's interesting. For a while, actually, Commissioner Stewart was the designated person because of his knowledge of forest policy. And it wasn't the West Lane for a while. So I just want to correct that for the record, that for a long time. And then when he resigned, it kind of created a void in our knowledge base somewhat. And we had that kind of hiccup in trying to, whether we actually were appointing directly to the council or appointing somebody to vote for somebody for the council last time when we were trying to replace Faye's position. But yeah, I'd be happy to serve as the voting delegate. And I appreciate that there is the majority of the state lands in Lane County are in West Lane's district.
That sounds like a yes to me. So since I still am on, just a procedural question. I notice in item 3B in your background analysis, one of the sentences, and I'm asking this question. It says, this involves a procedure which is affiliated with membership in the Association of Oregon Counties. And since at this time, this county is not a member, does that interfere with this one way or the other?
This is AOC.
AOC, not AOCC.
I apologize, thank you.
Close.
Okay, well then.
Hey,
I can't get my words right, so.
any further questions, comments, or concerns about the order as presented? And with modified to include Commissioner Bozovich's name. Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The order 19-11-12-08 with Commissioner Bozovich's name is adopted by majority vote and unanimous vote of all commissioners voting and present. Thank you so much. We can now return to our county administration announcements, item 7E.
Okay.
So if you have any others.
I have a few things. First, just on today's meeting, we'll need to do the executive session this afternoon after the 1:30 afternoon items. I believe that's about an hour-long executive session.
Do you think that'll come between 2:30 and 3:30?
I think it was going to come after the 3:30.
After 3:30, so more like 4:30 or 4:45, 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
More like 4 o'clock.
I have a 5 o'clock
Got an
deadline.
hour, 2:30. We probably can do the public works item before that, before the 3:30 item, and then we'll be there, but I can verify.
Okay.
We need Karen Gaffney, and she's not available till 3:30.
Yep.
So that's one. Two, I just want to share with the board, because there was some discussion about travel and the NACO annual conference. Just so you all keep in mind sort of what's available for commissioner travel and the policy that you all adopted. We have two different pools of resources for this for you to consider. One is a pooled resource of $15,500 for all 5 of you. That includes $3,000 that we set aside for the chair. Each year, typically the chair of the board, goes to the United Front. So it's the chair of the board for the prior year. So we'll do United Front, I think, in February of 2020, and it's typically the chair during 2019. So Commissioner Sorensen would go in 2020. We take $3,000 from that, $15,500 budget for that. That leaves $2,500 for each commissioner, which includes conference registration, meals, and everything. And then above that, $2,500, and that was all solidified in an APM, Administrative Procedures Manual, that the board approved. That includes a process for that. That's APM Chapter 2, Section 7, that we actually brought to the board and the board approved. And then prior to this fiscal year, each commissioner had a $4,000 annual budget. The Budget Committee and the Board of Commissioners increased that by $11,000 to $15,000 to provide discretion for commissioners to have some office support or for other items. And so that's the other. So you have $15,000 per individual commissioner budget in which to draw from for any additional expenses for travel or conferences. So I just wanted to share that with all of you as you're thinking about the conferences that you want to attend, whether it's the NACO Legislative each year in Washington, D.C., in February, late February, early March, or it's the NACO annual conference that rotates around, which is usually in July, or some other travel. And remember that the resources are budgeted on a fiscal year, which is July 1st to June 30th. Okay, so that was that. Happy to answer any questions on that. I wanted to, while Mr. Ramirez is no longer with us, I wanted to just make that announcement and give you a little background. I know all of you are familiar with Austin Ramirez, who is now our permanent Economic and Community Development Manager for Lane County. Austin came to Lane County in 2018 from the city of Claremont, California, and he has a bachelor's degree from Cal State University and a master's of public administration from the University of La Verne. he came to us as our community and economic development officer focusing on rural outreach. And so we created that position a few years ago, and you heard today our partnership with RAIN. We've really had a lot of focus, a lot more focus in the last couple years around rural outreach than we did previously. We recognize that we spend a lot of time and effort in the metro areas because that's where most of our population and business activity is, but really it's the rural communities that that rely on our support because they don't have those other resources available to them. So Austin's done a great job of really building that rural economic development outreach work. We did a national search, and we had 25 applicants, 18 met the minimum qualifications. We interviewed a number of those individuals, narrowed down to a pool of finalists, and Austin rose to the top of that. We've had wonderful feedback from our rural communities that he has worked with, from the chambers, from our city partners, and from others throughout the community and the great work that he's done. So we're excited to have him in that role. You'll hear more tomorrow, both from Austin and from other partners. It's great that you heard from some of our rural partners today, and you'll hear from some other rural partners tomorrow. I believe we have Florence and Mackenzie River representatives, as well as Eugene and Springfield and Business Oregon, that are all going to present to you tomorrow. So looking forward to Austin's leadership role in economic development with us. And then finally, I wanted to share with the board, since we have a couple minutes before lunch here, there's been a lot of, you didn't have any testimony today. The last gentleman you had some testimony on, but in the last few weeks, a lot of testimony about shelter and winter strategies. And I just wanted to share with the board, as the Eugene City Manager, will also be sharing with the City Council an update on a number of the TAC recommendations so that you have that where we're at on this effort. First of all, our goal is around housing and poverty and homelessness is to create an environment where homelessness is rare, brief, and non-recurring. That's our goal. We recognize that there's always going to be a level of instability and challenges and dynamics in individuals' lives that may create that reality, but we want to make sure that homelessness is rare, brief, and non-recurring. We also recognize that many of our service providers are operating at capacity, and so Lane County and the City of Eugene have come together and approved this partnership plan, and we're working with others in the City of Springfield and throughout our rural communities. Our focus in the metro area is in a number of areas, and I'll just update on a handful of these. First, on the emergency shelter, Lane County and the City of Eugene have developed a siting team. So this is staff from Eugene and Lane County who are looking, along with resources from our geographic information system staff in Lane County, that are providing mapping resources, identifying sites that meet certain criteria, and we're partnering with the City of Eugene on this to identify properties that may or may not be owned by Lane County or the City of Eugene. They may be privately owned properties, but that meet certain criteria that we can consider for acquisition and implementation of a 75 low barrier beds, as well as a navigation center to connect people to additional services. We also understand the City of Eugene has taken the lead on our emergency shelter effort. They have appointed a staff person that is leading that effort while it's a partnership. They've appointed a staff person that is taking the lead on that. They've identified an infrastructure material, what's called a sprung structure, and so this is a somewhat flexible material that that is less costly than a bricks and mortar facility, can go up quicker, has flexibility to expand or contract based on the size of the need. So that's what I think, as the board knows, this City Council has identified resources to invest in that material. And in the meantime, the city and county have partnered with St. Vincent de Paul to double the capacity of the Dawn to Dawn shelter, which now has a capacity to serve about 200 people per night. They are operating at full capacity with a wait list. We are in ongoing conversations with St. Vincent de Paul, as I have shared with the board. about additional options for additional winter strategies that have not been budgeted this year. So we have not identified additional resources for that. I will share, we have a meeting coming up next week between myself and the city manager and the executive director of St. Vincent de Paul, as well as some of our staff, to talk about that, as well as resolving some open questions about, we have a contract with St. Vincent de Paul that covers the expanded service at the Lindholm Service Facility on Highway 99, which we're contracting. We've allocated additional resources for St. Vincent de Paul to be open from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. For some reason that is yet unknown, at least to me, so it may be known to others, but I'm not exactly clear on why that is. There have been increases in costs, and we believe there may be some shifts in resources at St. Vincent de Paul that have caused that increase in cost. And so we're having conversations with St. Vincent de Paul to understand what's driven that, just to maintain those hours that we have a contract for. So we need to get resolution to that issue, and then also to have the conversation about the potential or what expanded winter strategies shelter beds could potentially look like. But all of those, so I just wanted the board to understand that these are ongoing conversations. There are some moving pieces there that we'll work through, and I'll report back to the board on that, but know that we are in ongoing conversations about that. Important also to know that in the approved TAC report by the board and the city council, the low barrier emergency shelter was planned for year 2, not year 1 of that plan. So that was something that I know we've had conversations about, when is the emergency shelter going to be up and ready to go. The plan is for it to be ready and up to go by next winter because of all the siting and construction work that needs to happen, as well as an RFP that we need to put out for a service provider to actually operate that shelter. On permanent supportive housing, as was mentioned this morning, we have the groundbreaking this week for the, so we actually have broken ground, but the ceremonial groundbreaking will happen this week for the 51 beds of permanent supportive housing as part of the MLK, the Commons at MLK project. So that's November 14th. Encourage the commissioners, if you're available, to attend that. Lane County is also providing, Lane County provided the land and $500,000 in resources for that project. We've also allocated $1.5 million in funding for 40 additional units of permanent supportive housing throughout Lane County, many in rural parts of the county. All of this housing is going to be targeted for those who are hardest to serve, those experiencing chronic homelessness or have particular acute issues, veterans, people with disabilities, women and children. So Lane County is taking the lead on the permanent supportive housing front. Again, partnership with Eugene and Lane County on both of those, but each of our agencies are taking the lead on those different pieces. On mobile street outreach, we're actively engaging with people with lived experience and community partners to inform program services, and the structure that outreach has included partnering with those with lived experience to reach more than 300 people to date. The city and county are developing an agreement for staffing and contracting with local service providers, and we're expecting to launch that program in early 2020. We're doing landlord engagement, so Lane County and the city of Eugene staff are working with Homes for Good to explore a process for use of one-time funding to create a pilot incentive program for landlords who will make their properties available to people experiencing homelessness. So we'll have more on that for you, but we're actively working on that effort. The Strategic Initiatives Manager, this is the homeless czar position, the sort of position that is going to, the city and county have jointly funded to be a catalyst for leading, particularly the permanent supportive housing work, as well as supporting the emergency shelter and other large pieces of the system. We're working with a professional recruitment firm. That position, we're doing a national search. It is posted, and we anticipate that we'll have more information by the end of this year for that important position. And then a couple others. We're doing move-on strategies that started in September 2019, a partnership with Homes for Good that helps people stabilize and transition into longer-term housing. Our coordinated entry system is allowing for service agencies to provide efficient, effective services that match the needs And then our best practice training is bringing together service providers from across the county to provide most up-to-date training and tools to do their jobs better. I also have a proposal in this folder here from Carry It Forward, which we're considering, which would be additional resources for additional winter strategies this winter. It would provide expanded laundry service, fuel, and other outreach for warming services for individuals that are unhoused. So that is yet to be executed, but that's an additional add-on service that we're considering. So
Mr. Administrator, before we move on to another aspect of your announcements, I just wanted to ask, a lot of the material you were just reading from, I'm wondering if we can get that put up on the county's website as part of your announcements.
We certainly can do that.
I think that'd be helpful to the commissioners that are asked, well, what is the county doing? And we can refer people to that.
Yeah, happy to do that. And that concludes my comments, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
We will post all those comments on under this item.
Okay. Questions and comments from commissioners? Commissioner Buck, then Commissioner Bozovich.
Question on the rural economic development person, now that our person has moved up. What is the timeline for that position or recruiting for the rural position?
I'll be talking to Mr. Ramirez today about that. His appointment was just made last week, and so we'll be talking. I have a meeting with him later today to talk about next steps for that position, but I would anticipate that we will post that position. Our expectation is that we're going to fill that position and that it will continue to do rural outreach because we've seen a lot of benefit and success there. And there are other elements of economic development that we'd like to focus on. And part of what we're going to do in our work session with the board tomorrow is really seek your feedback on where you'd like to see our focus in economic development be. Actually, tomorrow is to understand what we've been focused on. And then we're going to come back in a couple weeks and ask for your feedback after that settles in on what you'd like to focus on. But rural economic development outreach is an area that we feel like, particularly given the fact that the county has reduced over the course of the last couple decades, reduced the level and amount of services that we provide in rural communities. This is one area that we've heard that our rural communities have really valued our outreach. And it came as that position was created as a result of a lot of outreach that we did a couple years ago, working with our rural partners to identify how we could most best serve their needs. So I would expect that within the next few weeks, we'll have that position posted.
Excellent.
Thank you. So along with your information you presented on our winter strategies, is there some place that lists like a total number of spaces available in all these programs in a single list, including other providers, et cetera? Because, one of the things, I hear about is, we have over 2,000 homeless people, and that's probably an undercount. But I don't think people appreciate, and this is including the warming center programs, what our total capacity is on any given night to where it drops below freezing to house people. We have, we have the capacity at the mission. We've got our now 200-bed Dusk to Dawn program. I have no idea what the total capacity of the Egan centers are when they're operating. And there are some warming centers that operate outside of Egan, in Florence and Veneta. And then we also have, some of the rest stop programs and car camping programs. What is that total capacity on any given winter night? And I'm just kind of curious because as I start adding things up in my head, I'm getting pretty close to 800 or 900 capacity, but I don't know if that's even correct. So I'd just be curious to know what is that total capacity?
And I'm not prepared with an accurate number for you right now, but we will get that. You're right. We have the 200 Dusk to Dawn. There's about 400 at the mission, 400 beds at the mission that are available. I can tell you that the Wheeler building at the Lane Event Center had 140 40 and then over 200, or the first night and then over 200 people. The second night likely would have had over 300 people had it been open a third night. You know, there are a number of rest stops through the city's rest stop program.
We had a list last year, but it is dynamic.
Yeah, it's changed and it's increased significantly. So we'll pull together that list and provide it to the board.
Yeah, and I understand some of the rest stops, their capacity is that, you know, if it's single occupancy of the tents, it's one thing. If it's double occupancy, it's another. So there's a range in that capacity somewhat. So if, you know, if just kind of knowing, you know, what the minimum max capacity is kind of on any winter night, just because I think sometimes we don't really understand just what we're providing as community. And then I know there's stuff coming online. The 75-bed emergency shelter or 51-bed, you know, permanent supportive housing. But I just, for this winter, what's our capacity?
Yeah.
Be great to know.
Yeah, we'll work on getting that.
I just want the chair to know that I wasn't constantly lifting my hand. I was exercising. This is part of my physical therapy.
Okay.
But I did want to speak.
I caught you on the upswing.
And I'd like, if I may, I'd like to add to the commissioner's remarks. I don't know if this is possible, Steve, but more than just a current list, I think what might be very cool would be a dashboard in real time that was available through various mechanisms and websites. So at any point in time, a person could look at that site and visually see where there were beds available that night and how many. So that, by the way, it would be good marketing for the county too. Because, and it's just a concept that as you were talking, Jay, I just wanted to add to that. My experience, which is fundamentally different, it's not with this, but my experience is when you can create simple visual displays in real time that show, you know, that provide a service for people in need right then, and a marketing campaign lets people know where to get that information, that might be a cool add-on. That's all.
Thank you. I had a couple of items I wanted to ask about, Steve. And the first is I would like to know if when we have items on our agenda where we have listed the time for the presentation and the time for the board discussion, whether staff are informed that it's part of their job to manage the presentation so that the people that are invited to come here have some expectation of how much time they're supposed to take, and also so that the commissioners can help me or any other board chair manage what are at least the agenda team's idea of what the commissioner time would be on any given item. I'm wondering if you could give us a little update on that.
I believe that is happening.
Okay.
So, you know, I think the economic development item may have gone over by a few minutes, but it was about, I thought it was about 25 minutes was the presentation, and we scheduled it for 20. And there may have been some confusion on that. I know for the work session tomorrow, we have a number of people that are coming, but we've been really clear. The staff has been really clear with everyone. Here's how much time we're allotting. You know, sometimes not every presenter is able to sort of keep it exactly to the time limit that we would like. But yes, that's my, that's the expectation that we've set with staff, is that we need to communicate with any outside parties that are coming in what the time limitations are.
Right.
So I think we do the best, and if the board feels like we're getting items are going longer than we had anticipated from this, what we can't always anticipate is the amount of time it will take for the board to ask questions, but this is your meeting. So you should, you know, take as much time as you need to ask questions and seek answers to those. But I think we're doing everything we can do to notify folks to try to stay in their time limits.
And again, just for some historical reference, there were times, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, where this room was full of people waiting for a 5-minute item or a 30-minute item. And we've really cut down on that inefficiency by having not only more time certains at the agenda team and more discipline as far as both the presentations and the times that the commissioners, at least the commissioners on the agenda team, have anticipated to be board discussion. But you're absolutely right. It's very difficult for us to always know how long things are going to take. And I usually tell people from the outside world, i.e. the taxpayers and voters, I tell them it takes the time it takes. We don't always know exactly how long it's going to take. I just was taken, one of the presenters said, oh, I thought we had 30 minutes. And I'm going, well, where did you get that idea? It says on the agenda, that there's 30 minutes total and 10 minutes for board. And probably board went over and probably presentation, but it wasn't a big deal. And we were fortunate too today to not have very much public comment, which again kept us well within our timeline. The other question I had for you is a kind of a follow-up to what Commissioner Bozovich and Commissioner Burney mentioned as far as, how to not only convey to the public about what we're doing with all of this sheltered, unsheltered, semi-sheltered, non-sheltered, homeless, housed really well, housed not very well, all this whole continuum. And I wanted to kind of follow up on that. One is that my understanding is our staff actually knows most of the homeless people in the county. They actually know the people, and that the percentage of people that are homeless that have cell phones and access to the at least some level of communication is pretty high. And we know that of the general public, the voters, the taxpayers, the business owners, the people that have to deal with the, let's say, downstream consequences of all this homelessness, people camping in their yards or in the medians of the streets or whatever. We know that they have access to it. And so just to follow up with the idea here of a active website for what are government shelters, what are nonprofit shelters, what are these places, how do you call them, how do you get in to them? We know that Homes for Good is very active, and we'll be having this big, formal groundbreaking. We know we're doing things, and we also know that some of these are volunteer staffed, and they may or may not be staffed. If it's 75 degrees, they're probably not staffed. If it's 115 degrees, they probably will be staffed. If it's 20 degrees Fahrenheit, they'll probably be staffed because people will care and volunteer and be able. But there's a certain amount of money that even goes into these so-called volunteer sites that the county, and this is why I agree with what Commissioner Burney said, it's good for us to point out, hey, this isn't just happening because of volunteers. It's happening because of volunteers and public tax dollars that are going in. And that money just doesn't, come out of the sky. It's coming from taxes, and it's being administered by Lane County government or City of Eugene or City of Springfield or wherever it's doing it. I just feel like we need to really get more active so that business owners and residents know who to call, and they know that there are organizations that'll go out and try to help these people and bring them to appropriate facilities. I won't say shelters. I won't say homes. I'll just say a place. And I just think that, and to Commissioner Bozovich's point, we know that there's different ways of describing all this in terms of statistics. The more we get the heart of it displayed in terms of some graph or chart or visual, as well.
Charts are visuals.
Yeah, graphs and charts and other things that are ways of displaying that. And I would be very interested in to know whether we have the ability to text these people and say, oh, by the way, there's facilities there, or from the people who are concerned about their neighborhood declining and they don't know who to call. So they usually call the police. Well, that's probably the most inefficient way of solving that problem. So
one of the things that we are talking about, and we're talking to the city of Eugene about this. Last year, we had a lot of success in our response to the camping downtown and the transition to Camp 99 and then the transition to the Dusk to Dawn, the expanded Dusk to Dawn. That was not all, it didn't all just happen. There was a lot of behind the scenes, and we actually, I think there was an award given by Aoc, a community partnership award to Eugene, City of Eugene and Lane County staff for that effort. We had a very formal structure for how we managed that event over the course of several months. That was really led to the success of the management of it. So we're exploring putting into place some of that, potentially putting into place some of that formal structure that would allow for us to respond to incidents in the moment, that would allow us to continue to make the progress we need on these longer term investments. And one of the areas that we've identified that we need to do a better job in is communicating to our policymakers and to the public about all of the work that's happening. I want to be, I think it's really important in these structures that we're all thinking about what role we need to play. And so, we have staff that are in really the navigation center, the coordinated entry, and the street outreach are all intended to be in time dealing with folks in the moment that are in need and triaging them to the services, making sure that they're aware of what beds are available or services that they can connect to. Having teams that are working on the siting for a permanent shelter, for a low barrier shelter. So we're putting these teams together, and then we're thinking about how we have a really formal structure that is, similar to an incident command type structure that we could deploy to manage all of this work. And so again, communications is an important part of that, and we will explore ways in which we can put together an infographic to make it clear to the public about what is being invested in. So we'll work on those items and continue to report back to the board with appropriate
Okay,
data.
Commissioner Burney, then Commissioner Farr.
You're missing some stuff, but go ahead.
If you'd like to.
No, that's fine. Go ahead. What else we're missing?
I would like to say that, first off, I hope I can say this, I think you're doing a kick-ass job. And I think that, and that's part of what spurred my comment. I see such intentional, aggressive attempts within operational parameters and capacities and expanding those parameters and capacities, all happening at the same time. And the reason, just to be clear, I said what I said, had nothing to do with internal communications that would be part of a command control protocol. They had more to do with empowering people at various parts of that process to be able to click a button, input information, have a visual immediately impacted, and have that visual available for public knowledge and recognition. I think that we could generate much more public support and mitigate criticisms that are unfounded. There will always be founded criticisms by such an element, and I've had success with those kinds of things. But that's all, and it needs to be really understood. It was founded upon a respect for the work that's been done, and the fact that most people aren't privy to the kind of reports we're getting and all of these programs and how quickly they're expanding. And that's all. I'm just talking about elevating the profile, and I think you're doing it, but that's where that came from. I wanted to be really crystal clear. It was out of respect.
Okay, Commissioner Farr.
We'll be on the break. We'll be on the break. I'll cover it later.
Okay. I'll just, summarize this, at least my views, is that we think of government services, like, yeah, you're excused. We think of government services as maybe siloed, like if a constituent of mine wants their kid to join the Navy, they want to know how to do that, I tell them, call the Navy. They have Navy recruiters at, the mall in Springfield. If they want to if they want to borrow a book from the library, I tell them to go. If they're a Eugene resident, I tell them to go to the Eugene Public Library. Well, if I've got homeless people camping on my corner or in front of my business, who do I call? It seems like in this day and age, we would want to provide, think of this homeless problem holistically, not simply from we're going to help homeless people, but how about we need volunteers to help homeless people, or people that are homeless are obstructing your business. Don't call the police. Go to this website, register your concern, and someone will try to help. It seems to me that we could think of it as a broader thing than just the person themselves, because it's affecting, the problem is so big, it's affecting lots of people. And so, anyway, I agree with Joe. I think you're really doing a very good job of trying to understand the changing views of the elected officials as the problems, magnify. And I guess we'll talk about it later under future work sessions. Anything further before we recess till 1:30? Okay, so we'll recess till 1:30.